The Board of Supervisors to order. Mr. Hohen, may we have a roll call, please?
Superintendent Giomi.
Supervisor Giomi.
Supervisor
That's
Giomi.
close. I'm
Okay.
here. Either way, I'm here.
Supervisor White. Supervisor Horton. Supervisor Schutte.
Here.
Mayor Bagwell.
Here.
Good morning, Board. We have a quorum.
Thank you so much. We're fortunate this morning to have co-pastor Brady Roser. Would you come on up and get us started from today? And he's from the Bridge Church.
Let's bow our heads and pray. Father, we praise you, we thank you, we glorify you, and just love you that we can live in such a beautiful community, in such a beautiful place here in Carson City. Father, I thank you for the leaders that we have in this community, that they are living a life that brings most joy to you and the best to our community, Father. Lord, I pray for all their decisions, and I pray for all the new people coming in, Lord, that it is their full heart and their life to bring life to our community in many more ways, Father. God, we love you, we thank you, we praise you for today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you so much. Who shall I pick on? Mr. Yu, would you like to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay. All right, we're now going to move to our public comment period. And so first off, I just want to recognize that we received public comment from a few people via our public comment email system. And so I'd like to acknowledge that we received those, requesting that agenda item 8B, which is for possible action for appointment for 2 planning commissioners, and item 8C, which is for possible appointment of an individual to our audit committee, be pulled from consent. I want to also note for the record, however, that there is nothing in state law, the Carson City Municipal Code, or the city policies and procedures for boards, committees, and commissions that prohibit appointment by consent or require a question and answer format of interviewing. Individual candidates for planning commission positions that are nominated by supervisors and appointed by a majority vote of this board under our policies and procedures is not inconsistent with state law. Interviews for vacancies are not required when waived by the city manager per the policies and procedures. The city manager is not requiring individual question and answer interviews of these 2 nominees, as they are appointments by supervisors. And it has not been our general practice of the board to have this format when they are supervisor nominees. We do an open interview process when it's the at-large position where the public submits their applications to us and wish to be considered. In this case, we have the 2 vacancies and 2 nominees. The application materials that have been provided to the public satisfy the required criteria. As to the sole applicant for the audit committee, the Carson City Municipal Code provides for an interview of candidates, but we only have 1 vacancy and 1 candidate who previously applied for and was interviewed by this board for a different board. Although it was to a different board, that interview gave this board ample information to make an informed decision on the qualifications of that candidate. And we take her previous interview as a substitute for the formal need for a duplicative interview today. And this board asked her to apply to the audit committee because we already heard her credentials. If any member of this board wishes to pull this item from consent, that can certainly be entertained. But board appointments are for the board's determination. This is all for efficient conduct of this meeting. All applications and material are available for the public to view and were provided as supporting materials to this agenda. If there are members of the public who wish to give public comment regarding the potential appointment of a person, they are certainly welcome to do so during the two public comment periods. We have one at the beginning of the meeting and one at the end. And so just wanted to again acknowledge, we like to try to answer the questions that we get via public comment on the email system. So on public comment requested to speak at the beginning of the meeting, I have Mr. French. Good morning.
Good morning, Mayor and board members. Thank you, supervisors. Denny French, Carson City, Nevada. I would like to take off, or you've already had several people say that, but I was not tuned in. I'd like to get off of the consent part, the 8A, 8B, 9B, and 9C. And I just want to thank you all for making it through. That snow was a surprise to me. I was out at 4 o'clock digging. Anyhow, hope we'll have an opportunity between some of these items to have public comment. I did hear only that 2 would be available today, and is that, okay.
That's not what I said.
Or could you?
Okay.
Okay.
On the consent items, on the 2 of them that you asked, if you have public comment about
Either of,
the
or,
appointments, please feel free to make
Thank
your
you.
public comment
but then,
at this time.
right, thank you very much.
You're welcome. I don't have anyone else signed up, but I see late people just arrived.
Betsy Strasberg. I'd like to request the Board of Supervisors and the city manager to put Title 17-10 on a future agenda. I know that there's some plans to schedule a workshop, but that's not until March. And it would be nice to have the workshop sooner so we can have a discussion, but if that's not possible due to scheduling reasons, then a discussion here may identify the areas of concerns by the constituents so that they can be addressed more fully in the workshop. I was one of the persons who asked for pulling those items from out of consent. I think it's just as important as the board sponsoring board members for us public to understand how they will conduct themselves during the meeting. For instance, how they feel about 17-10 would have been very, very useful information for us, but given the board has not proposed a withdrawal from the consent, we'll have to see to that during the subsequent planning commission meetings of how they feel. But I do urge the board to pull it because it is valuable information for the public to understand their motivation, particularly since one of the candidates is a long-term career with the city and knows many of the department heads who impact the planning commission projects. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Again, I don't have anyone else signed up, but is there any other public comment? Ms. Stevens.
Good morning, Board of Supervisors and City Manager. My name is Karen Stevens, and I would like to reiterate Betsy's request to add Title 17 to a Board of Supervisors meeting agenda so we can better understand what's happening with that. There seems to be a lot of contention regarding this particular issue, so that would be my request. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Do I have any other? Mr. Nagel?
Richard Nagel, for the record. 17-10 needs to go on the agenda for the Board of Supervisors so that we could discuss it. There's a lot of confusion about it, and it's being interpreted in very different ways from a variety of different people. And people are kind of upset about it, is what I've been getting. And I think it would be nice to head something off at the pass and take some action on it. And I appreciate it being on the agenda. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do I have any further public comment? Okay, again, just for the record, we like to try to answer questions. The 1710 development standards will be discussed on March 3rd at an agendized retreat-style meeting so that we can have it as much more interactive discussion with the public and the Planning Commission, so just to let you know, that will be on March the 3rd. So if you want to get comments ready, even in advance, you guys do a great job of writing in your prior public comment. If there's areas of specific concern, as I think I heard Ms. Strasburg say, you have a lot of time between now and March 3rd to develop talking issues for us to consider at that meeting. Be happy to consider those. Thank you. Okay, we're going to move on to agenda item number 6, approval of our minutes of December 15th, 2022. Does any member have a correction, changes? Okay, I'll accept a motion for approval.
I move to approve the Carson City Board of Supervisors meeting minutes of December 15, 2022 as presented.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We're now going to move down to the floor. I guess that's a great word for it, right? We're going to move down to the floor so that we can recognize some of our great employee work. I think we might have to turn the picture to get the whole crowd in. I love it. Okay, so. All right, where is Darren Anderson? Look at this. Woo, woo, woo. Sorry. We always have to start with thank you and congratulations. All right, Darren. So this is a proclamation, whereas Carson City's quality of life attracts talented and loyal employees. That's right, another clap, because he is. Whereas every day, Carson City employees put to use their broad array of skills and expertise with efficiency and integrity for the benefit of everyone in our city. Whereas Carson City values its employees and acknowledges that recognizing employees for their hard work and dedication is critical to the future health and growth of our city. And whereas we owe a substantial debt of gratitude to the Carson City employees and applaud those who go above and beyond in their loyalty and ability. Whereas Darren Anderson, Senior Project Manager, has done a remarkable job managing many complex projects for Carson City with innovation, dedication, and positivity. See that smile? Oh, isn't that something? It really is nice when you see someone really putting the effort in and they keep smiling throughout, right? Because we have some tough projects. I'm like, whoo, he's still smiling. While he also contributes his spare time to advance his abilities, thereby contributing to the fulfillment of the city's mission, values, and visions. Now, therefore, I, Lori Bagwell, Mayor of Carson City, celebrate the dedicated accomplishments of Darren Anderson in serving the community and do hereby proclaim Darren Anderson to be Employee of the Quarter. And I think we have a fake check. Oh, sorry. There is a real one that comes behind it, but you know, it's a good photo op. And that way Darren's family's gonna know he got $200, right? So, yeah. And Public Works, you guys nominated him, Miss Randy? Yep. Yeah. Oh, come on, there you are. I was gonna say, come on up. Randy was the nominator. There you go. And you know, you get a proclamation too. You might want to frame it. Okay. Yeah. Give the check back. I'll give you the proclamation. No. Oh, no, we have to use it again. We're thrifty. I know it's bad. We are now going to move on to the presentation of our length of service certificates. Do I have the batch, Alana? They individual, oh, okay. I was going to do that. We'll do that a little different next time, but that's okay. We're going to try, because it's, January, it's a new year, so we have an opportunity to see if we want to try to change this up a little bit. So we're going to start with John Platt. And he's our senior construction inspector. But I also heard something else. Take it away, Elvis. Oh!
Love me tender, love me true.
Anyway, I want you to know what great employees we have because they'll even serenade you. I'm honored to have, I take the proclamation. Yes. All right. Mr. Schultz, would you tell us a little bit about John?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. And that serenading, that goes on daily out on site. Like that's John for you. So at home too. Yeah, John Platt is our senior construction inspector. Started his career with Public Works almost 26 years ago as a seasonal employee and found permanent status shortly thereafter. He began in the street maintenance division, working any and every task that was asked of him. With his strong work ethic, he has been asked to wear many hats within the city, having done everything from plowing snow to parking enforcement. For the last 15 years, he has been a senior construction inspector, working hard to safely move traffic through work zones while ensuring the best construction product possible for the residents of this great city. Thank you, John.
Okay, well, this one is a little bit ridiculous. Where is he? All right, Kenny, come on over. our sheriff. I'll take the certificate part. Okay, 20 years. Really, though, thank you for all you've done for our community. It's very important. Super job. I don't know that we could have found anyone better. Thank you so much. So thank you, Kenny. And I can't wait to hear what your underling has to say. Safe.
His job's on the line.
I thought so.
You could tell he's waiting as well.
Yeah.
All right. Everybody get comfortable. It's going to take a couple minutes. Sheriff Ken Furlong, born and raised in Carson City, graduated from Carson High in 1975. He began his career in public service as a Carson City Fire Department dispatcher. We forgive him. He enlisted in the United States Air Force in 1978, served honorably for 20 years until his retirement in 1998. He continued his public service work by joining the Department of Public Safety, where he was assigned to Investigations Division and Parole and Probation. In 2002, Sheriff Furlong was elected the 26th sheriff to serve Ormsby County / Carson City and took office in January 2003. Since that time, Sheriff has realigned the organizational structure to meet the ongoing needs of the community. Today, in addition to traditional law enforcement units, Sheriff's Office staffs specialty units assigned to the Carson City School District, Traffic Management Enforcement, Mental Health and Crisis Unit, Special Narcotics and Gang Enforcement, Crisis Negotiating Team, Drone Unit and Enhanced Canine Program, and more. The Sheriff is committed to enhancing law enforcement and public safety through educational opportunities, community involvement, and youth and senior collaborations. Sheriff Furlong's leadership philosophy is to continuously seek opportunities that build upon the desires of the community. He insists all initiatives should contain components of education, information, and enforcement. As a result of his philosophy, Carson City has benefited in efficient and effective law enforcement with intense community participation and support. Sheriff Furlong's engagement in the community is seen while on duty at every community event. The Sheriff continues to organize the award-winning National Night Out, Sheriff's Night Out now, Cops and Kids Spaghetti Dinner, Sheriff's Open House. Additionally, Sheriff Furlong actively supports many local organizations such as Boys and Girls Club, Ron Wood Family Resource Center, Carson Community Counseling, Rotary, Cassie, they forgot to start the timer, Chamber of Commerce, Downtown Business Association, Nevada Humane Society, and more. If you've lived in Carson City for more than 5 minutes, you've probably seen Sheriff Furlong at one of the aforementioned events, usually with a cup of coffee in his hand and a big smile on his face. The sheriff will never be accused of hiding in a room full of people. You will always be able to easily locate him with his high energy and infectious loud laugh. Don't be surprised to see Sheriff Furlong out and about in the evenings either, sometimes backing up deputies on calls or conducting traffic stops themselves. Sheriff loves to be involved and engaged in all areas of the sheriff's office and the community. Basically, he loves his job. And lastly, as the undersheriff calls them, sheriffisms. We have a few sheriffisms that we'd like to share. These are some things that we have all heard over the years. One is, who's in charge? What is the plan? We cannot surge if we don't have the basics. Once we become aware of something, we own it. Kids are safer when they are in school. Communications is always the first thing to fail. Take care of your people. And the last one, are Danny, Jim, and Jerome ever going to work a full week? Congratulations to Sheriff Furlong, our longest tenured sheriff in the history of Carson City.
Got to stay up for the picture because it'll get big in a minute. It's going to get big in a minute. Yeah, I always stay in front for an obvious reason. But anyway, okay, 15 years of service is Kenneth Peck, our Senior Environmental Control Officer. Woo! Do you smile as much as Darren? The other Darren, not quite? Do you sing? Skip that too? Just give me the certificate and shut up. Don't embarrass me anymore. Okay. Oops, and then I have Darren that'll say a few words.
Ken Peck, Senior Environmental Control Officer, 15 years. Ken joined Carson City 15 years ago in our Environmental Control Group. As a Senior Environmental Control Officer, he supports the water, wastewater, and landfill divisions of Public Works. Ken manages our categorical industrial user program, ensuring our 21 significant industrial businesses are properly permitted and inspected, and our treatment plant processes are protected from accidental discharge to the sewer system. He also performs critical field sampling of our water system and helps administer the household hazardous waste program. Thank you, Ken.
10 years, which means she's not even quite halfway through. So we want to put that on the record. Or 30 years we look forward. She's already giving me a bad eye there. Nikki Aker, our Health and Human Services Director. Please come on up.
All right, Nikki Aker, as the Director of Carson City Health and Human Services, is responsible for overseeing health and human services for Carson City, as well as several health functions for the rest of the Quad counties, including Lyon, Douglas, and Story. She oversees the management of over 40 grants of all city departments. Health and Human Services by far manages the highest number of grants, and it's important to know that their grants have had no major audit findings. Nikki is responsible for the management of the Sexual Assault Exam Room, which is an important program for the city and its residents. It ensures that victims of sexual assault can get treated here without having to go to Reno or another jurisdiction for such a critical exam. In 2016, she was instrumental in Carson City Health and Human Services becoming the first health department in the state of Nevada to achieve national accreditation through the Public Health Accreditation Board. Nikki truly cares about the work she performs and is a strong advocate for public health and participates in many forums and professional organizations. She provides education on public health and serves as a resource to the rural counties. She collaborates with the health officers from Washoe County, as well as Southern Nevada Health District and the state of Nevada to promote Nevada's public health funding at the state and the federal levels. Nikki and her department led the city and the Quad Counties through an unprecedented couple of years. Can't imagine what that was. No one could have imagined the impacts and duration of COVID-19. She and her team had to adjust and adapt on the fly with changing regulations and changing healthcare needs. No emergency exercises or operations plans could have fully prepared her for the challenges of these last couple of years. Nikki was dedicated and resilient to the changing circumstances. Health and Human Services was instrumental in standing up a call center, providing testing, preparing press releases and reporting, contact tracing, and also quickly transitioned to provide vaccinations for the Quad Counties. She and her team have continued to be recognized as a model for the rest of the state during the COVID-19 response. We are very fortunate to have Nikki as our Director of Health and Human Services and would like to thank her for 10 years of dedicated service to Carson City and its residents. Thank you, Nikki.
I just want to acknowledge they're not able to make it today, but I do want to, on the public record, give a big shout out to Kate Allen. That's our document control specialist with Public Works. She has 10 years. Again, it's important to acknowledge her. Right, she can't be here. And then I'm not sure, did the sheriff not give him the time off or what? 5 years for Michael Gibson as a deputy sheriff. Again, I want to celebrate, right, out there working for us. Okay, next up, we have William Kobarger, our compliance officer. I think I've known him for a long time. Thank you. All at the same time, right? It's one of those kind of positions. There's not much you can do about it. Ms. Sullivan is his supervisor. Would you give us a few words?
Okay, so Bill Kobarger came to Carson City with extensive career experience in local government, including serving as the city manager in both Carlin, Nevada and Pahrump, Nevada. When Bill relocated to our part of the state, we were lucky to get someone with his experience to join the Community Development Department. Bill was involved in addressing violations at the Frontier Hotel and more recently at Carson Pines Apartments. The job, as the mayor alluded to, the job of code enforcement's a difficult one, but Bill does it with a great attitude.
I better cover that up. Okay. Next, we have Amanda McQueen, and she's our laboratory supervisor with Public Works. I got to tell you, thank you so much. And don't go away, because he's got to say a few words. There you go.
Amanda McQueen, Laboratory Supervisor, 5 years. Amanda joined Carson City 5 years ago at our Wharf Laboratory Supervisor. Amanda provides regulatory oversight to our critical water and wastewater treatment processes, helping ensure our water is safe. Her technical experience and drive has led to new certifications and an expansion of the service of our lab that our lab can perform, increasing efficiency, reliability, and confidence in the work we do. Amanda, thank you.
She might be the hidden jewel that's in there just constantly making sure we have clean water, right? Testing, testing, testing. So thank you for that. The whole community is glad that we test and do that. So this is the time where we're going to take a giant photo, I can tell from all the people in the crowd. So come on up and share the joy with your fellow co-workers for their picture to thank them for their service. So might be the whole room. I don't know. Come on up. Try it. There you go.
mix up all the papers. What are we doing? Oh, over there. That way. Hey.
Okay. That was a lot of fun. We'll come back to the agenda. We're now on the consent. Does any member of the board wish to have anything pulled for discussion? No? Okay, with that, maybe I'm going to do it a little bit different than normal because maybe, is Mr. French still here? No. Okay, no Mr. French. Okay, then I will accept a motion.
I move to approve the consent agenda consisting of item 8A, 8B, 8C, 9A, 9B, 9C, 10A, 10B, and 11A as presented.
Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect the motion was unanimous. Thank you. We're now going to move on to agenda item 13A, which is a discussion and update for both the public and the board members that have not previously been here during a legislative session. So we have Mr. Wood. Would you give us a presentation on this, please?
Good morning, Madam Mayor and members of the board. For the record, my name is Stephen Wood, Government Affairs Liaison for Carson City. I'm going to try and get this presentation up here. There we go. All right.
He came early and practiced. Don't let him pretend. Oh.
We have one of these in our office, so we know how it works. So resolution number 2020-R-23 was approved by the board in 2020 in preparation for the 2021 legislative session. The resolution is applicable to all regular and special sessions of the Nevada legislature, and it details the manner in which the Board of Supervisors, the city manager, and staff arrive at policy positions and advocate for those positions. All advocacy of city policy positions on legislation will be coordinated by the city manager with the assistance of myself. This includes all meetings with individual legislators, testimony before legislative committees, and meetings with legislative staff and stakeholders. The resolution describes two methods by which an official city position can be determined. The first is by a formal motion and vote of this board. The second occurs when the time constraints of the legislature prevent us, because of open meeting law, from bringing things before the board And in those circumstances, the city manager would come to those policy positions. Policy positions, however, made by the city manager may be brought to the next board meeting for formal action at the request of one of you. So when legislation that impacts the city is before the legislature, there may also be times when the input and testimony of a member of the board is necessary to properly advocate for the city's position. So in those circumstances, the city manager will reach out to you individually to try and fulfill that need. And I will coordinate with you when that happens, so we can set up, your schedule, the time, get any written testimony sent over to the proper committee, that sort of thing. If a member of the board does go to the legislature on your own or meets with an individual legislator regarding a topic relevant to the city, the resolution says that you should notify the city manager. And it asks for this so that we can keep a cohesive message and effort at the legislature, so we're not duplicating efforts or saying something different. So, board members could also reach out directly to me if you wish to coordinate meetings or testimony at the legislature. I can help you do that. Since I'll be in the building just about every day, if there's somebody in particular that you want to meet with, let me know and I can coordinate both your schedule and the legislator's schedule. If the city manager or staff are discussing legislation with individual legislators, the resolution requires that they indicate if the board has or has not taken an official position on that particular matter. Oh, I was on the wrong slide, I'm sorry. So we just covered that one. We'll move on to slide number 2. So here on every agenda moving forward throughout the legislative session, there's going to be a standing agenda item for this board. That item will be for possible action so that you can take action on any legislation that you wish. However, because of the constraints of open meeting law, the bills that we can discuss with you and you can ask questions of and take action on will be restricted to a list that will live on carson.org. That list will be generated out of our tracking sheet, so it will be everything that we've identified that affects the city. However, if you see something on that list or that's not on that list that you want to bring up, let me know and we'll make sure that it's added so that we can discuss it at the meeting. Let me see here. The staff report for that agenda item will also contain a running list of all the official action that the board has taken. So when you see that agenda item come through, you'll know everything that you've done previous to that point, and then at the next meeting, if you've taken any action, it will be on the following staff report as well, so that you have the running list, the public has the running list. And if anyone needs more detail on any official action or positions of the city, they can call the city manager's office and we'd be happy to provide more detail. So I'll be coordinating the tracking and analysis of all legislation that impacts the city. This tracking is reflective again of the list of bills on carson.org. Relevant department directors and elected officials will work with me to analyze legislation that impacts their departments as well as the city as a whole. We will also work with NACO and the Nevada League of Cities very closely to identify and analyze legislation and coordinate efforts at the legislature. And we'll be working closely with you, Supervisor Giomi and Mayor Bagwell, as you're the representatives on those two organizations. This analysis that we'll be doing will guide our prioritization of legislation as well as the topics that we bring to the board. So we'll be diving into the details of the bills that impact the city, and that's how our determination will be made about what rises to that level that we need your input on legislation. So we're encouraging individual board members to reach out directly to me if they have any questions or concerns throughout the legislative session. I can help to answer questions on legislation and or process, again, coordinate visits to the legislature, and assist with identifying legislation that might impact the city. I also intend on being present at your one-on-one meetings with the city manager for the first little bit so that we can, go over anything that you want to talk about personally at the legislature, or if there's anything you want to get added, we can take care of that there. And again, you'll be seeing me here throughout the session to give legislative briefings and updates on what's going on. And with that, if you guys have any questions or comments on the process, we'll be happy to take those now.
Does any member have a question? No? Thank you. Is there any public comment? This is just a presentation, but again, is there any public comment on our legislative practices? That pertains to this board or just of the legislature itself? Come on up. If it's within our jurisdiction, we'll try. If it's not, we'll let you know it's not within our jurisdiction, right?
And I'm
Mr.
sure
French?
you'll be very gracious about it. Thank you. Supervisors and Mayor, thank you. My question, while you're here, I've been trying to study up a bit, but as you know, I'm sort of spread out. I can't focus well. But there's so many things that I'm seeing in here. Is there a way to have something highlighted? Did you say that would be Carson.org, that I would be able to look up the legislations that you are proposing?
No, Mr. French addressed the questions
Oh,
to the chair.
I'm sorry.
No, that is a legislative book which we do not have control over,
No,
which
no,
is what
no,
I
I
thought
just
was
meant
in your
what-
hand. Carson.org
We'll have
will
the
be the list of bills that come out of that we think impact Carson City.
Well, I didn't say it quite as well as you just did, but that's what I intended. Thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay. Is there anyone else that has and you can always talk to Mr. Wood
Thank you.
outside. He'd be happy to help you. He has a lot of knowledge about the legislative process. Okay, then we're going to move on to agenda item 14A, which is discussion and possible action to introduce on first reading our GO bond. Ms. Russell, any updates, changes, discussion? We've been talking about this. It has lots of steps.
We have been talking about it. It does have lots of steps. Since we have a new board member, I was going to talk just a little bit how we're done. And congratulations, Mr. Horton. Good to see you again. Our 90-day petition period is ended, and therefore we're preparing to issue the bonds. So we have a resolution and then a second reading to adopt the bond ordinance, which will come to you next meeting. These bonds are for the William Street Corridor project. It's a $22 million project, and we are able to leverage over half that with federal dollars, which is amazing for a big project like this. So today I have John Peterson, who's with J&A, to give us an update on our interest rates, which I think you're all going to be happy about. And then Ryan Sherman from our bond council is also here, or Ryan Henry, I'm sorry, with Sherman and Howard, is also here for the tough questions. He's our bond counsel.
Thank you, Sherry. For the record, John Peterson with J&A Consulting Group. And as Sherry mentioned, really kind of looking at, in terms of process, where we'll be with these bonds over the next month. Our plan right now is to sell these bonds at a competitive sale. That's a sale that's based on the best price that we received from the market on February the 9th. The last estimate that we did of these bonds was as of Friday last week. Right now, we're looking at a financing cost of about 3.1%. And really that has a lot to do with the fact that we've seen long-term interest rates really come down. They kind of peaked in November from what we were seeing, and we've seen those come down significantly. When we started this process, I think we talked about being conservative in our interest rate estimates. And I don't know, sometimes it's just better to be lucky than good. But over that same amount of time, basically interest rates, if you look where they are today versus where they were in August when we began this, they're basically the same. So that's really good for the city. And again, the expectation is that we'll sell these the first week of February. That's when the interest rate is locked in. The bond closing itself, when we actually finish up the entire transaction, would be at the very beginning of March. But that's where we are. And I think as Sherry pointed out, this has been a long road. We've been to the board several times. And none of the previous statements that we've made about our plan for this bond. It's still a 15-year bond. It's still fixed rate. We still plan to pay these out of the sales taxes, and sales taxes have been strong in Carson City, at least through the first 3 months or first 4 months of the fiscal year. So no concerns from my end, but I'll just pause there and see if there are any questions.
Thank you. Does any member of the board have a question? None? Thank you. We don't, for either anyone on the dais. Okay. Is there, thank you so very much. Is there any public comment on, again, we're on agenda 14A. Okay, I'll accept a motion. Supervisor White?
I move to approve the additional funding as recommended.
We need the bill number for first reading.
Oh, I'm sorry.
14A.
14A. Whoops,
101.
I got it. I move to introduce on first reading bill number 101.
I have a motion and a second to introduce on first reading Bill number 101. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect the motion was unanimous. When
Thank
we
you.
get to the other one, just hit the button again, Mo.
I was reading ahead
I
and just
know.
picked up the wrong agenda.
That was good. We're now on to agenda item, thank you again. Thank you. Agenda item 14B, discussion and possible action regarding additional funding for final recommendation to the Nevada Governor's Office of Economic Development for our COVID-19 block grant for the Ron Wood Family Resource Center to be given an additional $60,958.
Good
Mariana,
morning.
good morning.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Mirjana Gavric, Grants Administrator for Carson City. And as the mayor stated, this agenda item is to approve additional funding in the amount of $60,958 to the Ron Wood Resource Center for the Community Development Block Grant COVID grant funding known as CDBG-CV, as recommended by the Application Review Work Group. If granted, this money would then help Ron Wood continue their rental assistance program for Carson City families and individuals that has been very successful here in the last about year and a half, 2 years. So I'm going to open it up to questions. Any questions about the program or the funding?
Does any member have a question? I don't see any. Thank you so very much. Is there any public comment on this agenda item? Mr. Nagel?
Richard Nagel for the record. I'm going to talk about two nonprofits.
It's the wrong agenda item.
Oh, I'm sorry. Wrong agenda item.
That's okay. We're all on a roll today, it appears. Okay, so no public comment on the Ron Wood continuing grant for assistance? Okay, I'm sorry. Ms. Strasburg.
Betsy Strasburg. I think we had prior conversations with Mariana. And my question was, is the rental assistance to the same family in successive months, or is it different families? And is there
Both.
data on that
Or both.
anywhere? Thank you.
Ms.
Turned it off, sorry. To answer that question, we have unfortunately seen consistently that it is not repetitive families. It is families and individuals that are new to the program. So
But they're not all new. Some are repeats and
not a
some are
lot.
new, but not
Very,
a lot.
very small percentage. In fact, I don't.
I just don't
Yeah.
want anyone on the record to assume that no one can have a
Right.
repeat grant. Okay, thank you. Any further public comment? Good morning.
I just want to mention to the board that Ron Woods,
Start with your name.
my name is Dee Dee Formaster. I'm with the Rural Center for Independent Living. And I want to remind this board about how important Ron Wood has been to this community. And their housing program has been phenomenal. It has helped a lot of our needy people who are here in our community, and a lot of the people who have been displaced because of the housing crisis. So without Ron Wood, this community would not be as well equipped to handle a lot of the housing crises that we have. So please do think about being supportive of them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further? Okay. Supervisor White, would you like to make a motion?
Let me try this again. I move to approve the additional funding as recommended.
I second.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect the motion was unanimous. Thank you. We're now on agenda item 14C, discussion and possible action regarding the appropriation of grant funds in the amount of $445,777 from the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021. Mariana, would you like to take us through the work group recommendations?
Sure. Again, for the record, my name is Mirjana Gavric, Grants Administrator for Carson City. This agenda item is to discuss and approve the application review work group recommendation to fund $445,777 support to the Carson City Housing Plan. On December 12th, 2022, the application review work group reviewed and ranked 6 applications, and the recommendations are as follows. The application review work group is recommending that 4 of the 6 applications receive funding, and the ARWG, or the application review work group, is recommending that 2 of the applications not be funded due to their low scores and or they did not align their goals with the Carson City Housing Plan. Any questions?
Does any member have a question of a particular, are the applicants all here in case we have a question on their
There's
application?
quite a few here, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Does any member have some questions that they'd like to discuss?
I do.
Supervisor White?
On the application for St. Vincent de Paul,
Ed is not here, but I will try and answer that question.
I was just trying to understand where they're really going with this. Within their applications on page 11, page 12, and page 10, there seems to be a little disconnect with how many people they're going to be providing assistance to. Sometimes they say 115 people, other times they say 25 or 35 people. So I was just trying to get a handle on where they were really going with that. So they're not here to answer that.
I can answer it on their behalf. So that was a tough call for that organization. This is a new program, so we're not sure how many individuals will step up in those 2 years. This is a volunteer program, so it's not like we're going to be seeking out, or they will be seeking out in these clients. So we are not sure, or they're not sure, none of us are sure what that number will be. So hopefully that helps or answers your question.
Okay, thank you. I have a question also for the community counseling group. Same basic question. First question anyway. It talks about helping 12 people, but this being a 2-year grant, isn't that actually going to be substantially north of that? It's more like 48 people as they rotate through the house?
Really depends, again, this is a pretty complex situation. It depends on a variety of obviously issues, but we hope 12 people a year, 24 people in 2 years would be ideal. Now, it's their choice to stay in the program or not stay in the program. So yeah, they could cycle through pretty quickly.
I notice in the application, they talk about their house on Cornet Way. I see from the assessor's office that they have owned that property already for 2 years. I'm wondering, what's the current status and current use of that house at this point?
I could not answer that question, I'm sorry.
Thank you. I think that's all that I have.
Sure.
Supervisor Giomi?
My recollection was that they were going to get another house because they couldn't use the funds from this to supplant. So from the presentation, my recollection was they were going to get another property to, that's my recollection. I spoke to the board before, or at the end of the last meeting about this. I sat on the working group that reviewed this. You know, going in as we sat and sort of broadly allocated the money, I was hoping for a clearer path. Let me say that. And I think that's something that the people who applied for realize also, that this is, there isn't a one-size-fits-all clear path. If there were, other local governments who have a problem far worse than ours would have found a way to solve it by now. The Community Counseling Center grant, I think, to me, shows us the tremendous expense involved in trying to take an individual from homelessness to housed and self-sufficient, and the cost involved in doing that. 223, roughly $250,000 for 12 people. Having said that, let me back up and go over some of the other applications and why I think they are valuable to this community. I'll start with Night Off the Streets and their request of $148,000. I think arguably Night Off the Streets probably has the best handle right now on our homeless population, where they are, who they are, and probably interacts with them more than anybody else. To me, and I said this before, I think one of the most important aspects of this is trying to get a handle on the problem in a way that's less esoteric than it is with our once-in-a-year counts. Because frankly, that it's ridiculous for us to use that number to try and solve a problem when it's a point-in-time count. We know it's a point-in-time count, there's value in that, but the reality is we need data. And I am not for allocating any of this money unless we're going to have data, because we need data in order to be able to solve the problem, in my opinion. So I think Night Off the Streets has a big leg up already in that a fair number of the homeless population is going there, trusts them, knows them, and to fund a position to help sort of be a point of contact for that group to funnel them into other services that already exist without spending additional money, I think is valuable. So to me, I think that's where it starts as a, I'm not trying to sound callous, but as a funnel, if you will, to sort of direct people to one place. Secondary to that, the amount of money that Ron Woods is requesting is a nominal amount of money and a fantastic amount of product that we'll get out of that. Getting people a license, getting people some sort of identification so they can begin to get benefits that they're already due is very valuable. You can't, I mean, I know some of these people, their possessions are gone. They don't know where their social security card is. They don't remember their social security number. They don't have a driver's license. They don't have an ID. You can't get services. You can't find family. You can't do any of those things without an ID, get a job. So in my mind, $16,000 is a drop in the bucket. And I know Joyce and her team, in cooperation with some of the other folks, will do a tremendous job. And finally, St. Vincent de Paul's program, to me, is the most intriguing, because it is a way to spend money to reunite these people in our community and put them back in the hands of someone who is their family or is a caretaker for them, who can then assist them, essentially immediately not be a burden, if you will, to the social services system. And it's a unique program. They've been doing it really very quietly on their own for years. But again, finding those people and getting them to St. Vincent's is an effort that the Night Off the Streets team can do. So to me, the three of those are valuable. I'm not trying to say that Community Counseling Center is not valuable. I personally don't. I think we could better spend that money elsewhere. I would recommend funding Ron Wood, Night Off the Streets, and St. Vincent de Paul for the reasons I stated. And I can't thank you all enough for your efforts here. And I was humbled by the complexity of this problem. I work on it pretty routinely in my other job in Las Vegas. And it is a task of huge magnitudes in a community like that. But they're spending a lot of money, a lot more than this amount of money, public money, donation money, to try and solve that problem down there. And they're making a dent, but it is a humbling problem that is affecting this country in its entirety. And those of you who work in this field and have a knack for it should be congratulated. So thank you.
Supervisor White?
Yeah, just a statement on the idea of this proposition in general. Indeed, these are folks in our community that need help, and likely when they move into this program, they have shown an initiative to get help. However, I'd like this board to consider some other things that are going on here in Carson City and actually across our entire country. If you look at our next two agenda items, William Street item is for asking for extra money because of unforeseen increased costs. We have a substantial need with 16A, the fire station, where we are trying to put together more money to get that fire station needed. And in fact, in 16A, there's a disclaimer in there that says, with larger, more complex projects like this one, there are many unknown challenges to uncover during the design process, which makes it very difficult for an engineering team to provide a precise scope and budget estimates until additional investigations and data are collected. And when you consider the unprecedented inflation that we're going through right now, the stock market plunged again this morning, and the federal government continues to manipulate our economy, making things worse and worse. I would suggest that William Street, the fire station, and the Quill Water Plant are projects that we don't know we can afford today because of all of the economic stuff that is going on. Again, these are good programs that honestly are already taking place in this community. I would like this board to at least consider whatever money is left over is absolutely allocated to making sure that we get this fire station built. I truly believe that the three projects that I have mentioned, William Street, the fire station, and Quill, offer a broader support to the more broad community than what we're talking about here. While I'm not opposed to these programs, I'm not opposed to this plan that we're talking about, I think we have a much more important set of projects in front of us that we do not know today that we can afford.
Anybody else want to comment? Okay. So all decisions that we make, allocate, benefit, they're all difficult, all projects. I think everything that everyone is saying is, I think you're all accurate. In this particular agenda item, I think that we put out a request for proposal to meet a particular project for our community. They responded. We allocated the dollars. The question is whether these, Lisa and I worked on the housing plan, and then we were not on the work group because you don't do both, or you try not to do both. So we are not privy to the discussions or the stuff from the work group, but they have recommended Ron Wood, Night Off the Streets, St. Vincent de Paul, and community counseling. So I too have no issues. We have experience with these nonprofits. Ron Wood, Night Off the Streets, and St. Vincent have been doing work in this community for a long time, and so has community counseling, but they're not here to answer some specific questions that I have. And so I don't feel comfortable moving forward with their application until I can get a few questions answered concerning the services, the wrap. They are going to charge $102 a day. I wanted to understand whether or not they have Medicaid funding. I just don't have enough information to be able to support that. Not that the work group, again, they may have had those questions answered. You didn't? You did. Okay, and like I said, I just don't have them because I'm not privy to that.
Sure, go ahead. I will try and answer them the best that I can.
So the issues in community counseling for me is the best part of their application is they can do the wrap services. It was exciting to me to see an organization that could not just do their housing component, but all those other services that we've all been talking about. They're able to assess the client and get them into the other appropriate treatment services. But I also know that community counseling receives Medicaid, Medicare. They have other rate structures. And I need to feel comfortable, what client are they going to take? And is it the objective to put them into this house for up to the 6 months, put all the wrap services, get their IDs? I mean, is it a timing issue that we're having, that we need to provide services and then they'll move them to billable services elsewhere in their system? I mean, I'm just trying to get the whole flow.
So your first portion of how you described the program is correct. As far as what happens after the program, that was not made clear to me in terms of what happens next. There wasn't really a plan in terms of, it's up to the patient too, as to what happens next and where they go and how they decide to live their lives. So that's part of it too, but there is no plan B that's specific to what you're asking. If I remember correctly, and if Stacy, if you remember something else, please share it.
My recollection is that they talked about this being a program where you come into the program, you work the program for as long as you as a participant want to. I mean, obviously they're not captured, right? So if they reach a point where they don't want to stay in the program, or they've reached a point where they've been provided a license, they've been provided potentially a job, or they hit the 6-month mark, then they're out of the program. Now, if they're out of this funded program, that doesn't mean that they won't roll back around to another program that Community Counseling Center has, or that Ron Wood has, or that any other social service organization has. But they did talk about the program being an up to a 6-month program, but they also indicated that it may take someone 2 months to get the things that they need. Yeah, I don't think they're, and look, they weren't making any promises. You can't make promises. You don't know what the participant is going to be like, right? And whether they continue to follow the rules, because if you don't follow the rules, you can't be in the program.
But there was a lot of kind of angst about the fact that, yes, they leave the program and they can decide to do whatever they want. So, we don't know what the outcome is. And I think that a lot of times we want that outcome. We want to know that they've been successful, and that's not always the fact. So,
And that was one of
hard.
the issues with me for this particular program,
Yeah.
where I struggled with the amount of money and the I don't know if the lack of accountability is right, but the lack of follow through, the lack of data, so that was my concern with it.
So may I, again, not having been part of that discussion, I'm struggling here. So on community counseling, I thought that the work group was recommending 1 year, find out the data. And so you're saying, though, for you personally, you weren't
I'm saying, as
convinced.
part of that work group, I was a part of the work group.
Okay.
The work group made a recommendation. I'm now a member of the Board of Supervisors. My position as I sit here now is to not fund them.
Okay,
That's just my recommendation. We have 2 other members
great.
who run that committee that are in the room, and you can ask them. I don't,
Well,
I'm not trying to run anybody into the ground here,
way.
but,
Let me ask it a different way, because I know part of our discussion here is to, as Supervisor White was alluding to, we would have, if we reserved, so let me ask it this way, should we reserve 250,000 to do contract services? So one of the things I think I understood from the, that not all applications were funded, so Spirit of Hope and Karma Box.
Correct.
And some of that deals with their ability to comply in the grant world with the federal government. Not that they aren't a good nonprofit, that there's just so many more, a plethora of regulatory things that you have to do when you're taking federal dollars. And so one of the things that the Housing Task Force was really wanting is the service for the street outreach program. And I think that that's still heavily needed. I think it fits with the entire program. So thinking out loud to retain in our allocation of ARPA funds, 250,000 to meet that street outreach, but we do it via contracts. So we're getting a specific service for a specific thing that we need. And then we were gonna reserve 223,380 based on the work group recommendation for the community counseling, which was gonna leave us $241,257 that on this item alone, we would move to the fire station. So then the trick is, you're indicating you don't want to reserve
so.
then the 223,380 for year 2.
So when I step back and look at it outside of the working group and as a member of the board, I'm inclined to agree with Supervisor White on some of those things. I think Ron Wood, Not Off the Streets in St. Vincent, is quite frankly very good use of those funds. When I compare what Community Counseling Center wants to do with the needs that we have in this community for a fire station, for Quill, for William Street, for some of the other ARPA issues that we need to address, my recommendation would be to move that 223 and the reserved amount of that ARPA funds for the next year over to these other projects that we're addressing next. reserve the 250 ARPA fund for Health
Correct.
and Human Services to provide services that need to be used there. You know, we also have that $300,000 set aside from the sale of land. And so maybe we take the 250 ARPA that we were going to dedicate to that and reallocate that 300, which we specifically said was for homelessness. The board made that discussion, and that 300,000 is used there, and then the other 250 goes back to this ARPA pool. So we'd then be throwing, I'm doing round numbers, 223 times 2 plus the 250 back into the ARPA funds. And we fund 1, 2, and 3. Now, to me, that is a very reasonable balance of expenditures of these ARPA funds for us to start a process of gathering data and working on a way to end some of this homelessness. So that's my nickel's worth, or maybe dime's worth.
Supervisor Schutte?
Listening to the conversation, and it's really helpful in terms of working through the different variables and trying to meet the needs that we have. You know, we have a lot of need in this community, and so I really appreciate this dialogue. One of the areas I would like to address are wraparound services, and speaking to it, we are so lucky that we have really good nonprofits in this community that actually do quite a really good job with wraparound services. And I absolutely appreciate what Community Counseling Center is has included in their proposal. But my concern is some of the overlap that, you know, there are other nonprofits that also provide wraparound. That being said, perhaps there is some room for improvement in terms of the coordination. And I don't know if there is or isn't, so this isn't a judgment statement, this is just brainstorming. But within the coordination of the different nonprofits providing services, to really share what it is that they each specifically do and how they can each help bridge the gap in need between the different nonprofits. Night Off the Streets, phenomenal work, amazing, life-saving, and it is really heavily invested on volunteers. I have a dear friend who works quite often, all different hours, and you know, that's amazing. And so based on that need for community volunteers, I think it's imperative that we make that, you know, grant that money so that there's somebody to help oversee this, but also somebody to help build the volunteer base and perhaps build possible locations. Ron Wood Center, Ron Wood Center does so many wraparound services already. And then again, to really help get folks connected to their ID, to their license, to the very documents that will help them get a job. Because sometimes, you know, it's easy to say, well, they can just get a job. There's so many jobs. They can't if they're not hireable. You have to have the correct paperwork. You also have to have the way to get to work. You have to have an opportunity to be clean and to take care of yourself in that regard. And so that's where this is getting really complicated, because we want these folks to be independent, but you can't do it alone. They don't have bootstraps to pull up. So I think it's a tough one. I think funding the 3, but then also allocating that 250. I wasn't in on the interview process. The Karma Box, apparently they didn't interview well, and in reading the packet there were a lot of holes. However, they have experience in the boots on the ground, being there, reaching out. I think about my skill set and what I'm good at. I'm good at what I'm bad at. It's terrible, and so I need to have help with that. And you align yourself with someone who has that skill set, and then collectively you can make it work. I feel that the skill set of Karma Box for that outreach component we can make it super clear what our needs are and help walk them through the needs, see if they're capable, see if they have the resources to be able to do that. And then that helps with that. So I so appreciate that outreach funding, keeping it aside. So I support funding the 3, and then with money to continue to work on the outreach, and then perhaps whether it's Karma Box or someone else, or as you said, Mayor, to really make it clear, this is what we're looking for ultimately to help get these folks into the wraparound service support system to be able to get on their feet.
Before maybe if I can have Nikki, could you come on up? Because maybe I need a little bit of clarity to help guide us in this decision. So we did, as Supervisor Giomi indicate, we had the sale of the hospital property or whatever we did, and we put
It was
Brown Street
property,
area?
right, it's
Yeah.
a long story, but basically,
Brown
we sold property that the city had acquired that was originally designed for low-income / homeless housing. And the board sold that property. It was a previous board, and we said that from the sale of that property, $300,000, because of the nexus of where that money came from, which was specifically federal government money through to the state, through to us, for homelessness, that we set aside that $300,000 for homeless services. So that's what I'm recommending instead of the ARPA funds we use for the coordinator for this contract service of outreach.
And so
data-driven outreach. I want to make that clear.
The question becomes, we already have not programmed that funding elsewhere. And that's all I need you on the record to indicate. Those dollars are available and have not been programmed, that we could have those dollars do the street outreach services.
So Nikki Aker, Director of Carson City Health and Human Services, and you are absolutely correct, Mayor. We have not
Didn't think so.
done
I
anything with that
just wanted on the
300,000.
record before we march down a path, and then you go, oh my gosh, they didn't ask me, and we already put it into a contract 6 months ago. So great. Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to clarify that that dollar had not been obligated. So as long as I'm comfortable, then as long as there's 300,000 available for street outreach and direct contract services, then I'm perfectly comfortable with the 3 that were recommended. And I'll get to Mr. Horton too. I'm sorry that community counseling isn't here today. I don't like to make decisions without giving them an opportunity to defend their own application, but they're not here to defend their application. So I can't, I can support not doing the community counseling. Mr. Horton.
Thank you, Mayor. I agree with Supervisor Giomi's comments. I think he's on the right track. But I also want to. Oh, thank you. I want to reiterate the importance of the fire station project and the emergency operations center and the backup dispatch center. It's hard to explain to the community how critical those pieces of our operation are. Having worked on that side of the fence, been involved in numerous emergencies, as many of you have in this room, you have to understand that we're in a difficult situation. And that is a critical component of the city that we need to make sure this project happens. It's imperative that we get this done. And I would turn more money toward that project. Thank you.
Okay. Supervisor White, one more round?
Yeah, I guess so.
Okay. We can. We
have
often
to-
laugh here when you have 3 votes for something, you're almost useless. But anyway, go ahead, Mr. White.
I too want to just reiterate what the mayor has said about community counseling not being here. Let me point out the difficulty of relying, without being derogatory, on secondhand information. I ask a question about what's the house being used for now? And moving forward, and Supervisor Giomi said, well, they're going to acquire another house to do this because they can't supplant. But it says directly in their application, Carson City Community Counseling will offer residents of the Cornet House with wraparound services. And in fact, the name of their program is the Cornet House. So again, I'm really uncomfortable allocating money when we can't have direct access to the folks that are requesting it. And just again, I think as a board, it's our obligation to, while these are good programs, they accomplish what needs to happen. These services are already in place without this funding. And as a board, it's our obligation to think about the broader support of the entire community. And that's these bigger projects we don't know today that we can afford.
Thank you. I'll take public comment on this item. Does anyone have public comment? Mr. Nagel, he wants to try again too. We're all on this today. Come on up.
Thank you kindly for your patience. I wanted to talk about 2 of the nonprofits I think should get funds. Not from the America Rescue Funds, but the indigent funds which specifically set aside for the purpose from our property taxes. Okay? Knott's has the most number of months' experience and data. However, it is not clear that there is no duplication in their success metrics. Guess who found homes may be the same people who found jobs. I hope that the CCHHS, the Carson City Human Health Services, will be very specific in their data gathering guidelines so that the measures are distinct and separate in each use category. Creating infrastructure with the center manager with no center seems to be a risky proposition. But if this board feels that it's worth pursuing, then I recommend a 1-year grant and watch their sustainability and success metrics to make any future grant decision. Fund supplies and 1 computer for the center manager at $75,000. St. Vincent de Paul is a family reparation project, if and when. Guests say they have a family waiting for them to return to. I suggest a pre- and post-travel survey to evaluate the success of this program in the monitoring procedures. There may be less risk in this endeavor, and if it works, everyone is happy. Again, 1 year of funds of about $28,000. Where's the Quad County agreement that Human Health Service was asked to implement so it is a collective to address this issue? There should be no other expenditures from Carson City without other nearby counties opening their checkbook as well as ours. The nonprofits say Washoe guests are bused to Bowers Mansion and Douglas guests are bused to Topsy Lane so they can walk to Carson City. They are getting calls from as far away as California and Las Vegas. Nonprofits say Washoe guests, if you build homeless shelters with wraparound services, it will be a magnet. There are enough funds in this community to take the challenge alone. However much it makes us feel good when we are seeking to raise taxes for road maintenance at the same time. My question is, where's the chamber members funding this project like Flavors of India did. Has the board looked at the statistics from Reno or Los Angeles or San Francisco
Thank you
who
so
have tried this
much.
before?
Your time is up. Thank you so very much. Do I have some more? Any, Ms. Coe?
Heather
Good
Coe
morning.
for the record. Good morning. I agree with what a lot of people have said, but we do need to take it just as someone would a new job and being on probation, and we need to see how things work. There are help wanted signs everywhere, and I have watched people be dropped off here from other counties, and that's ridiculous. We should not be, the dumping ground for every homeless person. We have a hard enough time coming up with money for roads and everything else that we need here. And I would like to see data for everything and accountability. And if people can't maintain a job, they should not be allowed to stay in the system. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Coe, I just want to ask for you to talk to Ms. Akers. You last time indicated that you saw other counties dropping off homeless.
Just dumping people off.
I'm just asking you if you have information about that, if you would get with Miss Aker. We're very interested in the where, the what time, the whatevers. So if you could do that, we would appreciate it. Thank you so very much, because we're not supposed to cart our people off to somewhere else. So thank you for that. And if you'd let them know, we would appreciate that. Do I have some more public comment? Ms. Strasburg? Pepsi. Just a second, I'll let her reset. You get your whole 3 minutes. I'm like, I don't want to
It's
cut you off.
hard to-
Heather was quick today, so sorry. There you go.
Betsy Strasburg. I appreciate the comments from the Board of Supervisors. I agree that with limited funds, the challenge is prioritizing expenditures that will benefit most taxpayers and provide essential services. The America Rescue Funds allows road maintenance, which transportation manager says that we have a deficit and it will be costly if we defer that maintenance in future years. All of the nonprofit applicants had their first bite at the America Rescue Funds and city funds, and some at significant amounts. Let's take care of the other taxpayers. The two top scores awarded by the Grants Committee was the Ron Wood Family Resource Center and Knott's. I was reading through all of the application and came across the Ron Wood Family Resource Center response to the equitable outcomes. At Ron Wood Family Resource Center, it says in the third paragraph under equity and homelessness, we start with the racial equity because racism permeates every institution and system in the US and Nevada. Is that really how they feel? If they really have that philosophy, I have concerns that they will be able to address the homeless population or our community in general. If you haven't looked at their application, please look at it before you make any decision. I understand that the $16,000 is not big dollars, especially since you already approved $281 in the prior agenda item, but that really is a big concern to me, especially in a family resource center. CCC was close to the threshold, which I think the Grants Committee set at 70 points. But temporary housing is not their demonstrated strength. Their primary revenue source is Medicaid reimbursement of outpatient services with a profit margin of 35%. Very good profit margin. If they wish to do housing for their future clients, they should do so from that profit margin. They have net assets of $2.6 million at the end of 2022. Doing brochures and classes to expand their reach could be self-serving. There is only one Mallory Crisis Center in Carson City in the Quad Counties. When people leave their mandatory stay, they stay in Carson City. This is not something that Carson City residents can afford to sustain in the long run. So I do agree with the prior speaker that we need a Quad County agreement. If we must do this, we want this chamber also to pitch in and use the indigent funds that we all pay in our property taxes and leave the America Rescue funds for road maintenance, which on other projects that the grants committee suggested, like the emergency center, which would benefit more taxpayers long-term. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Do I have any other? Come on up, Dee Dee. And again, please state your name for the record. Even though we know who you all are, you have to put your name on the record. Thank you.
My name's
It's not green. There you go.
Dee Dee Formaster. I'm with the Rules Center for Independent Living and Dewdrop Inn. I've worked within this community for the last 20 years, and I do want to say that the people that receive services that are homeless are people from this community. And I do want everyone to be aware that there is very few people who come from out of town that are utilizing these services. I do also want to say that it is absolutely vital that we provide services to the less fortunate people in our community. And I think Nights Off the Street, Ron Woods, and of course, our other organizations that are applying for funds all deserve to be able to utilize these funds. But we also need to look at the giant elephant in the room, which we are missing, which is affordable housing. We have wonderful programs, but people cannot transition because there is no working or low-income housing that is desperately needed in this community. So I want all of you to think about, once we get people off the streets, where they're going to transition to. And without changes in several of our organizations as far as our zoning requirements and housing, extreme housing needs, which are not being looked at, need to be looked at. We need workforce housing. We need to have low-income housing desperately in this community. So please consider also looking at that aspect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do I have further public comment? Ms. Stevens?
Good morning again, Karen Stevens. I'd like to thank everybody for their thoughtful comments. I really appreciate the thought they put into how these funds should be allocated, and I agree with their first three picks. A little background on me. I'm retired from the Department of Education, where I was education programs grants professional, and I administered grants and provided services, monitored programs, gave trainings on grants, and budgetary compliance. So after reviewing the budgets of these applicants, it occurred to me there seems to be some confusion regarding supplanting and supplementing. So under the OMB uniform guidelines, there are statutory rules against supplanting funds for activities that were previously covered by state and local funds. So, I don't want to pick on Ron Wood, but, because I think they have a wonderful service. But it seems like things that they're asking to be funded, they're already receiving funds for that. So that could actually cause the city some issues if you get the Officer of Inspector General coming down and having your books audited for some of these expenditures. So I think that's a concern. The other concern I have is all these years, been paying property taxes, and there's a multitude of things that are added on to it, one of them being indigent funds. And why aren't we using those funds, which is what it's supposed to be for, to fund these programs? Why are we using this one-shot funding that goes away in 2 years and we don't really, our application for sustainability is only half a page, and all of the applicants really didn't answer that question very well. So those are my concerns and comments. So thank you for listening to me.
Thank you. Do I have any other public comment? Okay, then I'm going to bring this item back up to the board. Before I go straight to motion, just as general discussion, because we have a future item for the reallocation. So if I'm hearing us correctly, we're interested in funding the first 3 recommended items. We will not do a separate reserve fund for the directed contract services for street outreach because the $300,000 is available for those directed services that we may like to buy for street outreach purposes. And then that technically would leave us $938,017 that we could push to remove from the previous appropriation of ARPA for homelessness projects. We could move, right, $938,017 to to an undesignated ARPA funds, and then we can discuss where we're going to reallocate those dollars on the next agenda item. I'm just, putting that out there for discussion and potential motions. So it looks like Supervisor Giomi is ready to try a motion.
That was going to be my motion. I could almost just second what you said, but I'll recap it once again. I move to allocate $16,127 to the Ronwood Family Resource Center, $148,770 to Night Off the Streets, $57,500 to St. Vincent de Paul, in accordance with their application and with the understanding that they will coordinate record keeping and data collection with CCHHS. I further move that the $300,000 from Brown Street property.
That's not on the agenda, not a
Okay,
discussed
you're right.
item.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Let's,
938,017.
is it not, I thought we talked about it in here somewhere. Did we not? Hold.
It's not in the
I
agenda
apologize.
title?
I thought it was in the notes.
That's
All right, and then furthermore, I move to undesignated in the ARPA plan of expenditures, $938,017 out of the previously allocated housing plan, as I said, to undesignated in the ARPA plan of expenditures.
I second.
I have a motion and a second. On discussion, just to, again, I like to try to answer any questions that I gleaned out of public comment. There was concern that Ronwood Family Resources was duplicative and therefore not potentially eligible. Ronwood Family Resource Centers has grant-specific applications that have done some of these services, but they may not replace or bill twice. We take compliance, as Ms. Stevens indicated, very seriously, and I know their grant accountant also does, but we will watch and ensure that there are no OMB violations of those dollars. So any other on discussion?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, I would
go
just
ahead.
point out that we have previously designated $2.5 million to road improvements from these ARPA funds. So we're not ignoring road improvements. We are allocating a substantial amount of money to road improvements.
Okay. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect the motion was unanimous. We're going to take a recess till 10:30. Thank you. we're back on the record. We are on agenda, oh, I gotta get myself ready. Agenda item 15A, which is a little bit of a spillover, but discussion and possible action regarding an appropriation of $500,000 from the ambulance fund and a reallocation of $2.4 million in American Rescue dollars to cover a possible funding shortfall for the proposed Carson City Fire Station with shared facilities for an emergency operations center, backup dispatch center, IT offices. Ms. Paulson, you want to take us through then some discussions on that? And we tried to, on the recess, update all our numbers based on our last action that we just took, so that we're all talking real numbers. Ms. Paulson.
All right. So the fire chief and the public works director are both here, and they could probably go into more detail about the project itself. But as far as the funding goes, the initial cost estimates for the project were completed in early 2022 and calculated using an estimate of $650 per square foot, which we thought at the time would give us plenty of room, in case there were some cost overages. However, based on the current economic conditions, cost estimates have increased to approximately $900 per square foot, or $19.5 million. So this has created an estimated funding shortfall of $2.9 million. To cover this shortfall and allow the project to move forward, staff is requesting that $500,000 be appropriated from the ambulance fund, which has, I don't know the exact number, but a couple of million in working capital, and $2.4 million be reallocated from ARPA projects based on updated ARPA project needs. So the reason for bringing this item forward now is because the next agenda item is a proposal to amend the city's current agreement with TSK for an additional $1 million for them to move on to phase 2, which includes schematic design, design development, construction documents, the permitting activities, as well as the project bidding and the administration. So before moving on to this next phase, we wanted to make sure that we have the funding necessary to complete the project. So from the ARPA funds, there was $1 million that was set aside for broadband that could be moved into this project. We believe that the broadband needs can be addressed through approximately $5 million in federal funds that the state received for their project. I think it's Every Nevadan, and to provide them with access to affordable internet service. And then also during last year's board retreat, the board had approved $1 million from the ARPA funds to be used for space needs. I don't recall if we had a specific place that was going to be used, but I think it was contemplated for City Hall and the brick building. And since the direction was for those space needs to be put on hold and to concentrate on the courthouse expansion, that $1 million in funds could be reallocated to the project. So I have up on the screen, since we made some changes with the housing plan, of what exactly we have available, and I'm not sure if anybody can see it, but so we have $200,000 that will be left over from the health salaries because those positions were not filled right away. And so we estimate there'll be about $200,000 there. And then there's a couple projects, the remodel of the city building for the Public Health Preparedness Division, and then the jail full body scanner came in less than we had anticipated. And with the changes made on the last item, it looks like we have $938,017 available from that housing plan funding. And then there's the $1 million for the space needs and the $1 million for the broadband. And then we had this little amount, $54,006 in unallocated. So that comes up to $3,241,601. And if we take $2.4 million towards the fire station, that would leave an undesignated balance of about $841,601.
So, board, we can meet the need for the fire station as suggested up here. That's 2.4 million. The other 500,000 coming from the ambulance fund, which certainly is again designated for those activities. That would leave us $841,601 that we can leave as undesignated to watch for the Quill Water Treatment Plant and the William Street project. I believe they're probably both around the 60% design, and so we should see those coming out. Potentially, we'll have bid responses or something, and then we can determine if we need excess money for those projects. And if not, we can bring this back then and consider what we've all been discussing all along roads. It's just my recommendation that we hold it in undesignated until we have bids on our other Quill Water Treatment Plant and our William Street project, as we've been discussing. So I throw that out. And
So-
again, roads.
So while we're putting that 841,601 into undesignated, do we have an opportunity to say that while it's labeled undesignated, that those are the only 3 projects that can go to?
No, well, we can, but I just don't think we should. When we bring an item back to take money out of undesignated, that's when we say where it goes.
So I
I
just
don't,
wanna-
I don't know
I-
what's gonna happen between now and
Well-
next January. There may be something else that, well, fire department, no more than 2.9 million. But again, if it comes up 50,000 short, they may have to come back again. So I think we should leave it as undesignated, and I think the staff here certainly understands what our intentions.
What I
like you
want to
said.
avoid is trying to wrangle some pie-in-the-sky last-minute idea.
I don't think, I think we've made it clear on the record that it's for projects,
Okay.
right? Maybe
Well,
that's, yeah.
And I would add, our board has set priorities, you know, as a board in general, and
Right.
I agree with you. I wouldn't want to set it aside specifically for that now, with the thought that who knows what, God forbid, some other disaster come up and we need to, do something else. But in general, I think we all agree. May I have the floor?
Yes.
Could I get the chief and the director to step up?
Uh-oh.
It's not bad. It's
Oh.
not bad.
You
It's
did
not
not get called to the woodshed?
They don't want to sit together, so they're
Oh, boy.
they're not, there's no striking distance. I just, the last time this city added a fire station was in 1973, and our population was about 15,000. So I want to make sure from my perspective and hear from you that these additional funds get us the facility we need and not the facility we're settling for.
Sean Slayman, Fire Chief. I'll take the first shot at it. So we have reduced the size of the fire station. The original plan was my vision for the fire station. Right now, we'll backtrack. Right now, all of our existing fire stations are at capacity. We have no ability to put any more staff in our fire stations without changing occupancy or doing a complete remodel, which would most likely be a tear down and a rebuild of a fire station. In addition to that, we currently store several of our apparatus, which are very expensive and have fairly long lifespans outside. And that's less than desirable. In addition to that, as Chief Giomi mentioned, or Supervisor Giomi mentioned, we have not added a fire station from a response perspective since 1973. So our ability to respond to areas in the city has been, the response times have been extended and the resources have been strained with that. So our goal and our vision was to build a station with additional bedrooms and additional space in the apparatus bays, our garages, so that we would have the vision of being able to house all of our equipment inside with potentially additional room for additional growth, trying to predict what our future organization looks like. In addition to that, housing additional staff. Where we are at today, it will house 7 bedrooms. We started with 3 large apparatus bays, and we've reduced that to 2 bays and shrunk the size a little bit. So 7 bedrooms will get us, an engine company is staffed with 3 people, and a rescue ambulance is staffed with 2. That is 5. If we have an intern from one of the colleges for a paramedic program, which we have partnerships with, somebody to ride along, or if we have extra staffing for the day, that would fill those other 2 bedrooms. But that would leave us with no real ability to expand from that point of view. The apparatus bays themselves will definitely meet the needs of the current expansion. So an additional engine company that would go into the station, which we have currently, and then an additional ambulance company, which would go in there, and then backup apparatus. So when those apparatus are no longer, if they're in for mechanical reasons or maintenance, we have another engine or an ambulance to respond on. So we would meet that. It does meet that. In the design process, we are having additional phases designed into the station so that if the cost per square foot goes down, we can add the 3rd apparatus bay or add additional bedrooms into there so that we can house more or additional firefighters for the future. So we do have that option as the project goes on, but it will meet our needs right now. It's not the ideal situation.
And so I guess, okay, I mean, I guess ideal isn't going to work because we can't afford ideal. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay. So we're using engineers' estimates, and I do construction too. I know that it's ridiculously expensive right now, and there's, I don't know that it's going to go down, honestly. So are we using engineers' estimates basically and just industry experts to get an idea? And do we think there's a chance that $900 per square foot will come down when it's bid? Sorry, I've asked you about 400 questions. Are we going to bid it? Will it be designed in such a way that we'll have an alternate to allow for the 2 things that the chief said, the added bay and the added bedrooms?
Darren Schultz, Public Works Director, for the record. I'm going to try to answer all those, but please let me know.
Well, just answer the last one. The rest is just me blathering on.
So this project, we're doing it by CMAR delivery method. So we've already hired our contractor, and they are at the table with us. So that's why we feel normally we wouldn't be coming to you or able to come to you this early in the project with cost overruns because we wouldn't know.
Right.
But our contractor is sitting there with an open book. This is how much stuff costs. So that's why we can narrow it down as we have today. The idea is as we continue to move forward and prices fluctuate and hopefully start to level out and maybe even go back down. The last 6 months, they've been all over the place. So the contractor is just, who knows what next month is going to be, much less a year. So we have that opportunity as we get closer that if there's funding there, we could add either additional rooms or an additional bay or both. The other thing that comes into this is if we don't do it as part of this project, this facility will be built so that the chief is not in the corner he's in now, where if you do want to add in 5 or 10 years, this facility will take that. You don't have to tear it all down and start over. You could add those facilities later. So it's being designed that way. So because we have the contractor at the table, we feel like we've got a better idea of where this is headed. And yes, it very much potentially could come down. I will tell you off of the chief's comments, we've been very careful not to allow scope creep in this project. We're not putting bells and whistles in it, but at the same time, it's a comfortable facility going forward.
Is there any, maybe you've had this discussion, is there any value at the time of construction or maybe adjacent to the fire station of just putting up a less expensive metal building with a heater in it to store that excess apparatus? So we don't have $150,000 water tender sitting outside, for instance.
So we've talked about that as a team, and the idea is if we can't get it as part of this station, does it make sense to put one of those up, maybe over at Fire Station 52, where there's more room,
Right.
and you could put more of a shed type of a structure and get that inside? We've had that
Less
discussion.
expensive, obviously,
Absolutely,
than a
absolutely.
CMU building or
Yes,
something.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right, good to hear you're working on those, and thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. I don't see any other. Is there any public comment on this item? Ms. Coe?
I'm all for this
Please
because
put your
we've
name
had
for
a
the
lot
record.
of,
Sorry.
Heather Coe.
I know. Thank you.
My biggest issue, once again, and I keep saying this, why is it we have all these shortfalls, yet the developers seem to be off the hook for everything? We have never, over the last 6 years, the amount of permits and development is ridiculous. And yet, where are they putting in the money for any of this? They're supposed to do their own impact reports, which was not happening before. And now there are shortfalls and everything when we have all this new development. And I would just like to know why. And anyone would put forth all of this without making sure we have a shortfall for the schools, for the roads, now for a fire department. And this has been known. So I would just like to know why the developers are not on the hook for a big chunk of this, because they're making money. Thank you.
Is there any other public comment? Okay, I'll take it back up, and then just for knowledge base, the LAMPA project does have an assessment for the fire department, but they have not built sufficient homes there for us to gather up a bunch. What do we have in there now? 30,000 or something, but certainly as that development occurs, we hope to gather more into that fund to be able to, maybe meet some more objects. The shortfalls wouldn't have been able to be collected by development in the first place because these are engineers' estimates that we would have had to do billings on at that time. The costs are runaway. Everything we have right now, you're absolutely right. It feels like every single thing that crosses our desk anymore it costs more, it costs more, it costs more, but I don't have that magic. So just like at home, I went and bought eggs the other day, and I don't know about any of you, but I almost had a heart attack, right? I'm like, ooh, honey, you're gonna only get 1 egg a day, not 2. Anyway, because these are expensive, but we do have a LAMPA project development agreement that places money into a fund for needs for the fire department. So with that, Nancy, anybody need the spreadsheet back up, or we okay as the motion because it's as discussed? So Supervisor Giomi?
I move to approve the appropriation from the ambulance fund of $500,000 and the reallocation of $2.4 million of ARPA funds as discussed, leaving an undesignated amount of approximately $841,601.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any
Aye.
opposed, say no. Thank you. Let the record reflect that was unanimous. Okay, we're now on to agenda item 16A, which since we just did 15, we now have the money to say yes. But for possible action regarding amendment to contract 213-00156 for Tate Snyder Kimsey Architects to perform the second phase for schematic design services through construction of the Carson City Fire Station with the shared facilities for emergency operations. Does anyone have any questions on this one? It's just to let our design contract. Is there anybody in the public that has any comment or discussion or anything on this?
So just
item?
a comment
Supervisor
on
White?
these increased costs. One of the things that happens is basically we put our preliminary numbers together 2 years ago. Right? So it's not necessarily a shortfall. In my mind, that's kind of the wrong term, because you can't, 2 years ago, and then all of this inflation stuff started. It's not really a shortfall. It's, we can't predict what's gonna happen from 2 years ago to today.
Okay.
So, do you mind if I say something?
Yes.
When the federal government released this ARPA funds, I can tell you immediately I saw, oh, here we go, inflation's coming, because you can't release that much money and have all of these projects going on nationwide and not have costs go up.
Yeah.
Because the construction companies are busy, we can't get supplies.
High demand.
So, I mean, this is not unforeseen, I don't think.
Thank you. Okay. So I will accept a motion. Supervisor Giomi?
I move to approve the contract amendment as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect the motion was unanimous. We're now on to agenda item 17A, which is discussion and possible action regarding a request to introduce on first reading a proposed ordinance amending the zoning map to change zoning from public community to single-family 6,000 for a parcel located at 700 Flashman Way. Ms. Ferris.
Thank you, Heather Ferris, for the record. At its meeting of January 20th, 2022, the Board of Supervisors accepted the 2021 Master Plan Report from the Planning Commission and identified the subject parcel as appropriate for considerations of a mapping correction. The subject property was at one time owned by Carson City and Carson Tahoe Hospital. The parcel was utilized as a hospitality house for families of patients undergoing treatment. The parcel is no longer publicly owned, and the on-site use of is a single-family residence. The parcel has a master plan designation of medium-density residential, and staff and the Planning Commission are proposing single-family 6,000 zoning, which will be consistent with the current use and ownership of the property. There are 3 findings of fact that must be made in the affirmative in order to approve the zoning map amendment. The Planning Commission considered this at their December 20th, 2022 meeting and has made all 3 findings in the affirmative and is recommending approval.
Does any member of the board have a question? Supervisor Giomi?
Heather, the property owner bought this property with the understanding that it was zoned public community. And a couple of the things that he mentioned was his shop and a separate electric meter. Can you speak to whether this zoning change would affect anything that he or they would want to do in the future?
Sure. So based on the conversation and discussion that occurred at the Planning Commission meeting, the property owner did confirm that the shop that's on site is utilized just for his personal use, so it's an accessory structure to the residence. At this point, he does not have any plans to utilize it for anything different. As long as it is residential in nature, it would not be an issue. Anything in the current zoning would require a special use permit. So
The way it exists today?
the way it exists today.
So if he wanted to add
If
100 square feet to the shop, it would require an SUP?
Correct.
And if we change the zoning to single-family 6,000, it would also require, well, it may not be allowed. Well, would it be allowed? Let me ask you that. If they wanted to expand the shop?
So yes, it would be allowed. It would require a special use permit just because of our code with regard to size of accessory structures, but the use is not an issue.
Okay. And the meter is not an issue?
The meter is not an issue.
Okay,
no.
thank you.
Any other questions from the board? Is there any public comment on this agenda item? Seeing none, I'll accept a motion. Supervisor White?
Thank you. I move to introduce on first reading Bill number 102.
I second.
And a second to introduce on first reading Bill number 102. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect it was unanimous. We're now on to agenda item 17B, which is to introduce on first reading a proposed ordinance amending zoning map change from public regional to residential office for the parcel located at 775 Flashman Way. Heather, are you going to take us through this one?
Yes. Heather Fairaskin for the record. So this request was also generated as a result of the 2021 Master Plan Annual Report and identified by the board as appropriate for considerations of a mapping correction. This property was at one time also owned by Carson City and Carson Tahoe Hospital and was the site of the hospital. The property is no longer owned by a public agency, and today the on-site use includes behavioral health center, continuing care hospital, and outpatient services. The parcel has a master plan designation of mixed-use residential and a zoning of public regional. Since the public agency no longer owns the parcel, the public regional zoning is not appropriate. This was heard by the Planning Commission at their December 20th, 2022 meeting. Staff recommended retail commercial zoning because it's the least intensive zoning district that also allows a hospital and is consistent with the Carson Tahoe Hospital located at the north end of town. However, staff did note during those discussions that residential office zoning may provide better neighborhood compatibility, but would result in a nonconformity with the existing on-site use, as a hospital is not on the list of allowable uses in a residential office zoning district. So after a lot of discussion, the Planning Commission recommended the RO zoning, noting that they did not believe they could make finding number 2, which has to do with neighborhood compatibility, with the retail commercial zoning district. There are 3 findings of fact that must be made in the affirmative in order to approve zoning map amendment. The Planning Commission has made all 3 findings in the affirmative and is recommending residential office zoning to the Board of Supervisors. I'm available for questions.
Thank you. So in general, the first issue is we are creating a non-conforming use. And so I have to tell you on surface, I don't support non-conforming uses, as it tends to, in the long run, come back to get us then that now something that would conform in a neighborhood now gets bogged down by the non-conforming use, having rights and not wanting things usurped. And so my discussion on this particular parcel wants to look, how can I be compatible with the residential area, because I'm very concerned about that too, but remain in a conforming use. And so can you talk to us about public community zoning? And just, I really want to bring this to our attention to look at that, because it doesn't require us to own it, which public regional did.
So all of the public zoning districts, and there's a handful of them, do actually require.
Can you bring that up in the code? Because I'm pretty sure I read that and didn't see that. It said it has regional benefit. It did not indicate that it had to be owned by a governmental entity. And and if we can look at that, because I'm trying to protect the rights of the hospital, because once it becomes non-conforming, if something happens for a year, they lose their rights to that, and that parcel potentially has to revert to the Waters family because there's conditions on their deed. So I want to try to thread the needle and do both issues here. So how do I protect the residents in that zone? And then is there something, if you can clarify for me, they are the subject matter experts, but if you can.
I have a
Yeah, go
question
ahead.
related to that, because I had the same question. If it's a matter of simply listing hospital as an allowed use in a residential office, that also would fix the issue. So in other words, if
Changing
you
the code.
change the category.
If we change the code,
Correct.
that's another option. So we're
My
looking at
comment-
options to create a conforming use. So we could add hospital into residential office. We could add that as an allowable use. That's an option. We could look to see whether public community is an option under our zoning
She has the
rules.
answer
And
now.
anyway, we're looking to make this conforming. I guess that's what we're all trying to get to. What is a way to make this a conforming use and protect that they're not going to put a gas station there? I
Right.
guess that's right. I think that's even what everyone's looking at.
Right,
So,
so it's not exactly clear to us, but it is implied that the public zoning districts in general are required to have public ownership. However, there's some vagueness there when you get to the public community. So, I think that it certainly does make sense to either residential office to protect the surrounding community or public community, both could work.
Can I ask her, from a planning standpoint,
Which?
what makes more sense? Putting this, as the mayor had suggested, or modifying the code to allow a hospital when medical use is already allowed in residential office, all right, a
Regular
doctor's office,
doctor's
a
office.
dentist office. So there are medical uses allowed in residential office. So from a planning perspective, what makes more sense? To do what the mayor's suggesting or to add hospital to the allowed uses in residential office?
So I think
Or permitted uses,
I
whichever
think
the
the
case may be.
public community zoning might make more sense in this case because we don't know what the future holds for this site. So, at some point in the future, if this were to sell and it was no longer a hospital and it reverted back to the families, then whoever ultimately ends up wanting to utilize the site can go through the zoning map amendment
So
process.
it would then take a public hearing to change it to,
Correct.
would it be residential office or, because I don't,
Correct.
I agree. I don't think any of the neighbors agree that retail commercial is the right designation for that neighborhood.
Right.
And I thought the planning commission came up with a great solution when they did residential office, with the exception of the fact that they can't make modifications then to the hospital.
Right.
Really without, they can't do an addition.
It would require a special use permit.
Changes the
So,
whole
Okay, thank you.
projection of the property. Right, and so I don't know, just again, we don't have the authority based on the agenda title, because I also like Stacy's question of potentially you just bring this back after the planners have really had a chance to look at the code and make which decision. I hate to make you do things off the top to say, I concur it should be public community, but it may be a better answer what Stacy said, and you'd have to bring it back to us anyway if we're not gonna approve residential office at this time because it doesn't have the hospital allowed use. So just throwing that out there. Supervisor White?
Yeah, I would concur. I think we need a do-over on this one. Really, if we look at the specific situation, we're in a nonconformance due basically to an oversight. But if today we purposefully create an oversight, I think that opens ourselves to even more liability than we're already looking at. And with Heather's comment that the code you pointed out, well, it's vague. I think we need to go back and not be vague.
Yeah, we'll have that chance on Title 18 revision. That's why I said you could bring
Right.
this item back and determine the proper cleanup cleanup on aisle 18. Look at Dan Yu, his face is like, I'm done with that. No. So there you go. But I think we have an opportunity as a board to do it right. And I think that's what everyone's after, the residents, everyone. So, right, I'll take
Yeah, I mean,
Supervisor
I just-
Giomi.
While they're going back, can you go back one picture? Or, yeah, maybe is there, if you go back more, does it zoom in?
Yeah.
Okay, so that one, no, that one back from that, sorry. While we're talking about this in general, and maybe we should have caught it before, I mean, we have a licensed healthcare facility on MFA property right now, right? Am I,
The congregate care?
the congregate care
That's
building?
correct. It's
is on that
congregate care
MFA
facility,
facility.
and that's a conditional use in
So I
multifamily
mean,
apartments.
should we at the same time be looking at fixing that as well?
It's a conditional use. It's already, it's there legally. It's not a non-conforming use.
Okay, well, okay.
Yep. So let me take some, is there any public comment on this item, 17B? Ms. Strasburg?
I was at the, Betsy Strasburg, I was at the Planning Commission meeting, and my confusion is it still a hospital? Because the way I was
is.
told at the meeting that the Mallory Center has some rooms on the second floor that are stay the night, overnight guests. So does
It's a
that
mental health
define?
hospital.
Yeah,
Yes.
is that define the hospital?
It is.
Okay, so if that's the case, I prefer residential office and making the change to include that, so it becomes conforming use. That would be my preference, because with the, what is it, the Anderson development coming up, there's lots of houses on there, and the parking lot may be converted into housing in the future. That's in discussion. And everybody else over there, the nearest retail is, I think, 1.5 miles or 2 miles away with LA Bakery. That's the only retail that we have. And if you have retail commercial, as was originally suggested, then it may bring up other things that will not be compatible, even a marijuana store.
Thank
you.
You're welcome. Is there any other public comment? Okay, I bring it back up to the board. So we don't need, I believe, unless I've missed the boat here, we would take no action on this item and let the planning staff have another shot at which methodology. So everybody okay with that? All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, we're now on to agenda item 18C, which is discussion and possible action regarding the master plan annual report.
17?
17C. I made up a different number. Oh, okay.
You got Title 18 on the brain.
I got Title 18. Dan's going, get rid of that title. Ms. Sullivan, would you take us through this, please?
Yes, Hope Sullivan, Community Development Director. NRS 278190 requires that the Planning Commission annually make a recommendation to the Board of Supervisors regarding the implementation of the master plan. The Planning Commission reviewed the master plan at its meeting of December 20th and made recommendations, which I'll review with you. Since the Planning Commission meeting, we've been working through Title 16. We don't talk about Title 16, right? Well, Title 16 is aviation. And in working with the Public Works Department through Title 16, it appears that there's more transparent ways to talk about how to handle land development with compatibility with the airport. So in addition to what the Planning Commission's recommendations are, I will be recommending that we add to the to-do list, so to speak, a review of the city's land development regulations vis-a-vis the airport and aviation to ensure that we can have transparent, easy to understand regulations, easy to apply regulations that will yield compatibility. Quick recap on 2022 and
Certainly, Supervisor
Sure.
Giomi.
I mean, we'll cover this, I guess, when you get into it, but can you just, in a couple of sentences, help me understand then the relationship between House 16 may drive Title 18? In other
Sure.
words, wouldn't we want to capture the majority of those Title 16 issues in Title 18?
Right, okay, so Title 16 is called aviation, and it talks about land use compatibility with aviation. A typical tool that's used when you're looking at land use compatibility between airports and adjacent uses is called an overlay zone. So we all know we have base zoning. Base zoning tells us how we use our land and dimensional criteria. How tall can things be? What are setbacks? Things like that. In Carson City, we have one overlay zone, the historic district. So the historic district doesn't tell you what your zoning is, your base zoning, but the historic district supplements that zoning by saying, if you're within this district, which is in addition to your base zoning, you have certain design requirements and you have to go to HRC and stuff. Similarly, using an overlay zone around an airport's really typical, a typical tool. It shows up on your zoning map. Everyone sees, I'm in an airport, I'm in the area of an airport. In one place I worked, for example, they would have extra insulation if they were in an airport zone. I don't anticipate that being the case. I anticipate the case being simply that it would alert people to that they are in an area where there might be compatibility issues with an airport, and we would look for verification that there were not compatibility issues.
So it would be an overlay to the existing zoning.
Exactly.
That would potentially add additional requirements.
Yes, but with the objective of it almost being a substitute for Title 16 and just a really easily digestible tool. It's just a zoning tool, and you look at your zoning map and you see it. So it's a very common tool that's used around airports, and I think we should explore it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so 2022, the focus was, and thank you to Dan Yu because he has really worked hard on this, is Title 18 and looking at essentially updating Title 18. We also had a really long list last year of master plan land use map and zoning map corrections. So you've seen some of those today. Some of those are still pending because when we took them to Planning Commission on December 20th, they weren't quite certain how they wanted to handle it. And those are the ones by Fairview in Colorado. So those will go back to the Planning Commission at its next meeting in what month we're in, January and February. For 2023, we again are looking at some mapping corrections, and this one's not necessarily a correction. The Lampa Ranch specific plan was adopted on March 17, 2016. Thank you. Section 313 calls for a 10-acre park on the west side, and 3.14, the specific plan calls for a 3-acre park on the east side. At the time the specific plan was adopted in 2016, the parcels didn't exist. It was just big ranch land. The parcels now exist, so we can now identify what those parcels are. So what I'm suggesting is that we, for both of these parcels, identify them with a master plan designation of parks and recreation and a zoning designation of public neighborhood. That way, as this land is considered for development or even for sale, people will understand what the expectation is per our specific plan. Currently, on the west side, the master plan designation is open space, and the zoning designation is multifamily development or multifamily duplex. And on the east side, the master plan is mixed-use residential, and the zoning is single-family 6,000. So if you were looking into purchase of these properties, you would have every expectation in the world that this was residentially zoned, it is residentially zoned property, and that the city's intention was for this to be residentially developed. And that is not the city's intention per the specific plan. So I think that will lend towards transparency and implementation of the specific plan. Next, the west end of Roads and Betts, and I hope you all had a chance to drive out here. Interesting area of the city and gain a lot of attention. It's on the market and we're getting a lot of people kicking the tires, and we've talked to some folks who have actually purchased land. When we look at the master plan, we see that the orange is high-density residential, the yellow is the low-density residential, and that green that you see in there is open space. Typically, the open space is privately held. And my guess is this is a leftover from, I think it was like in the 80s or 90s, there was a project out here. It was probably a tentative map. And at the time of the tentative map, they probably got their zoning intact, and that's expired. So it's a little different to have open space since we don't have a plan here. So I'm going to suggest that the open space area be redesignated as low-density residential. And our existing zoning is a little confusing because if you look at the master plan, you see the flat area should be high-density residential and the hilly area should be low-density residential. But our zoning tells us that we have some limited industrial in there, single-family 12,000, which is a medium-density residential, and conservation reserve. So to allow the zoning to actually implement our master plan, and I'll go back to the master plan, I'm suggesting that we look at zoning that would be I'm sorry, I'm looking for my notes here. The multifamily apartment, where our high density is designated on the master plan. And then the single family, 21,000, which would be half acre lots for the portion that would be low density. Having said that, I'm not asking you to amend the zoning map today, and I want to be clear for the public. Okay, so what we are doing today is, and I know some supervisors want this 100% done already, but we're not quite there. We're working toward that. Our master plan tells us how the land should be developed. And you just kind of had that conversation with Heather on your last two items. Zoning is the tool that implements the master plan. So if the master plan tells us it should be high-density residential, yet the zoning calls it out as limited industrial, we have conflict between the master plan and the zoning. The zoning's not implementing our master plan. So what I'm giving you today is recommendations that I'm making to you to, one, clean up the master plan map, as we're seeing right now on the board, and secondly, to make sure that our zoning is actually going to help us achieve the master plan and implement the master plan. So should you agree with my recommendation, what would happen is we would notice property owners, adjacent property owners, it would go to Planning Commission for a public hearing, they would make a recommendation to the board, and it would come back to you. Okay, I'll go to my next one, is over on Fleischman. So we're back on Fleischman. Last year, when we looked at the old hospital, I think it was Supervisor Giomi said, what are we doing about the parking lot? And I said, gosh, we overlooked that parking lot. So we said, we'll bring it next year. So we brought it next year. So the parking lot is zoned public regional. It's used as a parking lot. It's actually in different ownership than the old hospital, which I thought was interesting. Somebody asked me about it. I can't remember who. And, but it has a master plan designation of medium density residential. So if you have which kind of makes sense because you see the single family 6,000 all around there. So what I would recommend is that we look at the zoning, and again, because we want to implement our master plan designation, multifamily or medium density residential, and to create compatibility with the other area, I would suggest we look at a zoning map amendment to SF 6000. That way, if this were redeveloped, it would redeveloped according to the master plan.
Can I ask a question on
Sure.
that one? Since it's parking, is that parking been used to meet the required parking, number of parking spaces for anything? I just want to make sure I don't now, again, we fix
Right.
one thing and I render something else inappropriate or not accurate.
I understand the question. And
So-
actually, I did receive, maybe you gave me that question before the meeting. I can't remember. You all had a lot of questions. Anyways,
We were
I can't
busy.
remember who asked what. Anyhow, is it being used for the hospital? I don't know. I have not observed that to be the case, and I was very surprised to see it was in separate ownership. That said, I do know during COVID, they were setting up tents to do flu shots, to do COVID shots. They had containers there for the COVID supplies, which leads me to believe it was not being used as part of the hospital because they indeed were using it for their own programs. But it can continue to be a parking lot. There's nothing in changing the zoning that would preclude it from continuing to be a parking lot, continue to be maintained as a parking lot, continue to honor any leases they have with adjacent property owners for the use of the parking lot. What I'm saying is if it stopped being a parking lot, I think we'd be looking for a use that would achieve the goals of the master plan, and that's why I'm recommending a rezoning here.
So if we change that zoning to single-family 6,000, does it then, as a parking lot, become a non-conforming use?
It does, and I want to clarify what non-conforming use is. A non-conforming use is a use that was lawfully established. That use may continue. That use may continue to be maintained. That use can also even be expanded, although they're using the entire property with a special use permit. So there would be nothing in changing the zoning that would compromise the function of the land as it exists today. The zoning would dictate how future land development was handled.
So the same question I asked you before the meeting about up there off of debts and that.
Mhm.
Is the landowner, are you having conversations with the landowner? Are they good with this change?
One, we're not making a change right now. No, I have not discussed this with the landowner. If the board says, yes, we do have a conflict here, and again, what we're talking about is mapping corrections, where our zoning is not implementing the master plan. And so I'm identifying those for the board. If the board says, yes, we should clean that up so that our zoning does implement the master plan, I would then, prior to taking any action, reach out to the property owner and speak to them about it. At this point, it's just considering putting it on a to-do list, and I feel like I have an obligation to let you know when I see zoning that's not consistent with our master plan. Okay, I'll go on to our next one. Last year, we talked about the Brown Street specific plan, and you'll remember Dwight Millard brought this up and was concerned that it really wasn't achieving any objectives, and it was creating a burden to developers. We wanted to look at this in the last year. This last year has been busy, and we did not get to it. So I will admit that we did not get to it, and I'll put it on the to-do list for 2023 if you agree. The Planning Commission had some additions, and one of those additions, or 3 additions the Planning Commission identified, was the zoning on North Carson Street. The Planning Commission noted that the zoning on North Carson Street is primarily retail commercial, while William Street / Highway 50 and South Carson Street are primarily general commercial. The Planning Commission is concerned that this designation of retail commercial as opposed to general commercial, which is what, again, we see on South Carson and William Street, is really compromising the opportunity to be economically viable. And so they really want to look at this stretch of the city and see if this corridor, this arterial, should be treated like the other 2 arterials, namely South Carson and William Street. So the commission has recommended that we look at this corridor so that we can promote economic success there. The Planning Commission also brought up the tourist commercial zoning. The tourist commercial zoning is really limited in its use in Carson City. We usually say, oh, it's that field behind Sassafras and the hot springs, and it's that area. And actually, over the years, it's sort of gone back and forth, and depending on who's looking at the land, on whether they want it to be zoned industrial or if they want it to be zoned tourist commercial. Because it's such a small, limitedly used zoning district, the Planning Commission is questioning whether we really need this zoning district or if a retail commercial or general commercial could absorb it. And so they'd like to study that. Similarly, the general industrial airport zoning also has a very limited use. This zoning district was created, I want to say around 2017, but we already have an airport industrial zoning district, a general industrial zoning district, a limited industrial zoning district, and we're not sure we need 4 industrial zoning districts. And so this would be, again, something the Planning Commission would study to determine if it was necessary to have this, or could this property be absorbed in a different industrial zoning district and sort of streamline things.
So along that line, I know on the airport, there is a lot of consternation that some of those hangars that are not involved in commerce, they're private storage hangars, are considered commercial buildings. And those folks can't do the things in there they want to do because they're commercials. Can we take a look at getting with the folks on the airport and understand a way to move some of those hangars that are not really commercial buildings out of that designation so that they can do the stuff in there that they need to do without having to go out and hire a contractor?
And these are hangars that are on the airport property? Okay, I'm not certain that this addresses that, but I hear what you're saying. We can certainly have those conversations with the airport management. Next, growth trends. We tend to talk about growth trends when we talk about the annual master plan report. And I feel like we kind of talk about growth trends twice a year, because we talk about it with growth management, which I think is a very appropriate place to talk about it. And then we talk about it with the master plan annual report. So I'm going to be fairly brief on this because I don't feel like this is the time for the deep dive. But just to tell you what's going on, we did have 350 housing starts in 2022. On this chart, you're going to see that things were a bit slow, and in 2016, we saw development start to pick up in Carson City after the recession of 2008, 2009. The 2018 number is a bit skewed because that was Carson Hills Apartments and all the growth management allocations were handled in 2018. I do want to tell you development has absolutely slowed down. In October, we had 6 housing starts. In November, we had 7 housing starts. And in December, we had 5 housing starts. So that's, the economy coupled with the weather, coupled with supply chain, just everything all together. We'll see what 2023 brings, but right now, things have been slow. So I want you to know that. In terms of population, per the 2020 census, they declared our population in 2020 to be 58,269. And again, the growth management is really studying the growth of the city vis-a-vis resources, so I'm not going to speak to that. In terms of building valuation, again, because 2022 was so busy and active, we did have a building valuation north of $161 million. With that, I will conclude and just mention that the city's strategic plan calls for an update to the master plan in 2025. So in 2024 particularly, we're going to have a lot of work to do if we're updating this master plan. So what I've given you is what I suggest as sort of the work program for 2023. In 2024, it's going to be a much more comprehensive work program. The philosophy of the master plan as it exists today, and this map kind of depicts that, is to have a compact, diverse core surrounded by a green belt, what I call a green belt, with pedestrian access to the open space. So when you look at this map and you see the yellows and oranges, those are residential, the reds and are commercial, grays are industrial, and the different shades of green and some of the purple's public, and the shades of green are open space. So you can see that we have that compact core surrounded by what I call a green belt. And the idea is we use our pathway systems and sidewalks so that pedestrians who are in the core can access the open space. I think we have been implementing this plan. In implementing this plan, it creates some angst because open space in the core is not open space, it's undeveloped land. And we start to see development pressure there, which is consistent with the master plan. But again, it's still different, right? So that gets a little tricky. So with that, I am recommending that you move to accept the master plan report from the Planning Commission with the addition of the review of the zoning regulations related to development compatibility with the airport. And I tried to be brief, but if you want me to go in depth on anything, I'm happy to.
Supervisor Gioni?
Yeah, I want to talk about the master plan amendment and my understanding when we set the strategic plan in place was that it would be done in 25 and the work to start it would be funded in FY 24, which is July of this year. So I just want to make sure we're on the same page because I don't anticipate waiting until 2025, if it's up to me, to start a master plan update. We need to start a master plan update sooner rather than later. So I'm just saying that on the record, and that's what I'm going to push for when we're budgeting. So there's that.
Thank you. I don't see any other, Supervisor Schutte, sorry.
And Hope, if you can just briefly explain again, what is the benefit of a specific plan? So when we speak to the Brown Street specific plan.
Okay, first the city has 4 specific plans, and Brown Street's different than the others. The others are the Schultz Ranch specific plan, the Lampa Ranch specific plan, Virginia V&T Railroad specific plan. So if we look at what specific plan means in general, is this is an area where the city wants to look more in depth at this, and we really want to treat this slightly differently than other things. Lampa Ranch and Schultz Ranch are easy to explain. And at the time those specific plans were created, those were active ranches. And so the city said, okay, we have this big ranch land, it will likely sell and be developed. So when this big piece of land develops, what should it look like? And so they created specific plans for those two areas. The V&T specific plan is because the V&T is the entryway to the city from the east. It's an opportunity for economic development. It's a unique resource. So the city said, well, that we recognize all those things. So we want to look at the development around the V&T and around the depot, and we want to make sure that we have compatible development in that area so that this resource can indeed prosper as an economic resource, and this can indeed be a unique gateway into the city. And then the fourth specific plan is the Brown Street specific plan. And my understanding with the Brown Street specific plan is it was a somewhat blighted part of the city. The city had acquired some land, which it since no longer owns, to do some improvements in that area. There's some stormwater issues in there as well, and limitations with infrastructure in there. It's a really small area for a specific plan. So they came up with a specific plan with supplemental standards to help encourage development and design standards that would help cause that to be a really vital part of the city as opposed to a more blighted, troubled area of the city. So each of the a specific plan in general means we're going to look more specifically at this area because of it has a certain characteristic that warrants that. And in the case of Brown Street, it's a little different than Lampa Rancher Schultz.
Does, so within Brown Street, is there a partnership expectation, like with the developer and the city when you talk about the supplemental standards? Or is it something that the city does in addition to, or that the developer or the homeowners?
No, I understand. The supplemental standards are essentially extra regulations, to be honest. There's a requirement for street trees. There's a requirement that the parking be to the side or to the rear of the building. There's a requirement for, there was a development there where there was a requirement for a pro rata share payment into a stormwater system, whereas a property nearby that was developing that was not in the Brown Street specific plan did not have that same requirement. So Mr. Millard's concern is that this is a very small area, I believe it's 10 acres of the city. He owns a third of it. And it feels like there's extra regulations in that area whereas he's not certain that that's necessarily yielding what the city's trying to yield, which is, economic prosperity and the kind of stabilization in that area. So it'd just be an opportunity to look at that area, and maybe that area is a lot better than it was when we created that specific plan, and we don't need a specific plan there. I don't know. We need to just sort of take a deeper dive into it and look at what the objectives were of that specific plan. Are those objectives being met? Have they already been met? And do we continue to need to have developers provide supplemental improvements?
Thank you.
Okay.
Supervisor Giomi?
Yeah, I think just to maybe provide a little background, I think there was a hope when the land was acquired through, and I don't know if Nancy remembers, it was an interesting process where this land was acquired for the provision of affordable workforce housing through a grant process. The land ended up being deeded to the city. It was originally deeded to the state, Rural Housing Authority.
Right.
And there was this vision that, and this was the reason the specific plan area was created, because of the perceived blight and the fact that this land was now acquired by a governmental entity, that there was a way for that governmental entity's work to start to spread outward from the development that the rural housing would do. Well, there were issues. Rural housing was never able to develop it, and there were funding issues, and it didn't materialize. And so, I'm in agreement now that that vision happened and was in place then, and the conditions that, in my opinion, forces board to create a specific plan, I don't think are applicable anymore. And no work has been done in there, frankly. So why make it harder to do work when we know that area already needs work? We should accept whatever work we can get, frankly, in my opinion.
Apparently, currently and in the past with rural housing, these requirements of the spa have made it prohibitive to get done. And I think, isn't the sewer lift plant part of that?
It very well, that sounds right to me, but I can't promise you it's right.
Well, it may be that it's a set of additional regulations that had the opposite effect.
Yeah.
And I think that it's appropriate to review it, right? And we should, I think, do that anyway. When you set new criteria and regulations, you should always come back and have a checkpoint. You know, did we get it right? Is it correct? And again, I think in this particular area, when they created the spa, there was a vision. But I think the additional criteria ended up doing exactly the opposite, which is to continue to guarantee
Right.
that it would be a blight
Right.
because no one would develop it. So it just went in the opposite
Well,
direction. So
and
we
that's the
should
key
look
with
at
all
it.
of the things that Hope
Yes.
has brought up today, is that
Right.
this is the beginning of a discussion. This isn't necessarily the beginning of a change
Right.
or the beginning of whatever preconceived change would be. This is just the beginning of a discussion that needs to happen because there's incompatibility, which we've asked you to look at specifically, so.
Well, and I think that for the public that's listening, this is how the community development team gets their work tasks from us, right? This is what informs her work for 2023, besides everything else we ask her to do. But I think this just helps the public understand this is what we're asking her team to take on as tasks. Like you said, no actual necessarily result on the answer, but take a look at these things. So is there any public comment on this item? Ms. Strasburg.
So just for my clarification, what is the next step? What's going to happen in the next 6 months after this meeting?
She will do the review work and then appropriately take things through the planning commission.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. No problem. Okay, do I have any other, Ms. Coe?
Heather Coe for the record. I would like to ask once again for Title 17 1.0 to be put back on the agenda, to be revised
You were
or
not
something
here
so
earlier.
that-
We've already discussed that. It is on the March 3rd agenda. So, sorry you weren't here earlier. We already put that on the record. It will be on March 3rd's agenda.
But
So-
I would like to see something done with that before anything else is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It is a meeting. We can take action. It is a meeting. We just call it it's a special meeting that's called a retreat. Just for the public, the reason we like to do retreats, and I'm pretty sure that last year's retreat, you were thrilled. It's a much more interactive environment than a formal set agenda with only this item being discussed. I mean, a retreat is a much more conducive opportunity for the public participation. So it is agendized for March 3rd. I'm putting that out. Lots of notice for that so that you can prepare for it. Usually you get 1 week's notice, so you're getting lots of notice.
Same notice we get.
Yeah, oh, that's true too, same notice, so thank you. I haven't decided on that yet, thank you. Did you have public comment?
I do, and I just got here, so.
No problem.
Maybe out of.
That's okay.
Out of order. I guess
You're
I'm
fine.
on green. Leanne Sarum, and I am also talking about the 1710 topic. I understand that it was, and I had said I'm encouraged that it was put on the retreat as March 3rd. My concern with that is again, if it's just a 3-minute type of public comment where it's not open, like an open workshop, I would like to see it and encourage you guys to consider, like the Carson City School District, I've been on many advisory boards with them over for many years. And when we do like our bond advisory committee, it's not done in a super structured 3-minute public comment. You guys get to talk, we only get to talk certain times. It's actually a huge collaboration of everyone together at the same table with the same exact minds of coming together and working together, rather than it seeming that, there's the official leaders doing their jobs and then we are just there to listen and to input in our 3 minutes. So I'd really like to encourage, can we also encourage a workshop, a actual hands-on, just sit at the table all together rather than just having it at the retreat. I would really like to see that. And then also, let's see if I didn't get this in either. I'm always late. But I guess the last thing that I want to just focus on is saying that along with 7010 and along with the focus of what a lot of planning decisions have been lately, I want to say that there's two truths can be true at the same time. We need certain types of developments and certain affordable housing, but at the same time, we also need larger lots and single-family homes for people to grow into, for families to grow into. And I just find that the focus is so much on one side and not looking at the long-term generational decisions that can absolutely change the flavor and the nature of the way Carson City appeals to families and people staying here in the future. We don't want to cram and make these small developments and do all these things that then actually, like people like me that have family legacies here for generations and generations, and they're starting to wonder, do I want to stay here? Because of the decisions that are being made only on one side of the needs and not looking at the long-term, generational decisions. So the workshops, I think, would be a great way to be at the same table, all of us equal, rather than it being a little bit more official without a lot of collaboration. So thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any more public comment? Ms. Stevens?
Karen Stevens for the record. It's my understanding that public comment is for people to make a comment, and I am offended when somebody is talking and they are interrupted. That disrupts their thought. Their full 3 minutes isn't being utilized because they've been interrupted by somebody, and I just don't think that's appropriate. So I just want to voice that. I hope that people can make their public comment in the future without being interrupted. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any more public comment? Ms. Formaster?
Hi, Dee Dee Formaster for the record. I would really like for the board to consider diversified housing for people to be able to live within our community that are from low-income areas mixed in with all the other regular community members and people with disabilities, because it is very vital that they be allowed to be part of the community and not crammed into one area in the east side. I think diversification is really, really important. And so I really want that to be considered. And I will be there at that meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have anyone else? Are you coming up, Denny? Mr. French?
Denny French, Carson City, Nevada. Thank you, Mayor and Supervisors. I've had a problem staying awake today, and I apologize. Just not up to par on my usually sort of always ready to jump, which is probably good because I've sat back and I've listened to so many great comments from you all, and I've appreciated that interaction that you did. So I'd like to see more of that type of discussion that was going on earlier. So thank you very much. As far as affordable housing, if it's not defined, and there's a new term in my vocabulary, it's called workforce housing. And we're really workforce we're not very kind in the sense that we don't have limits on what a person can charge for an apartment or any kind of restrictions on that, which some cities are having to go to. It's just getting out of hand. Their employees can't live in the area, then there's a problem. And I think some of the character of Carson's being lost because we're a mix. We're blue and white, and we're, as far as our workforce, you've got from myself as having been janitor or a city employee, but those are big leaps of employment and financial situations while we're still all blue collared. We're not all equal. And we're crowding our workforces out of the neighborhood. I had a talk with a young lady that was in a facility at the VA. She said, I don't know, Denny, if I'm going to be able to stay. I moved out here to work at this particular location, but my rent's going to go up $300. It was a sidewalk conversation, and I'm going, how can people afford to live? And then I am being crowded out by the concerns of tax increases. And our development hasn't gotten it so that it's paying for itself. It's being thrown back on a person like myself with a fixed income that was lucky enough to get into a home, but with everything else in the economy, if you keep putting, okay, the road's got to be taken care of, I get that, but we're expanding, and I don't think that the fees that we're getting for the development are going to pay for the roads or the streets, and how many bond issues can you set? And I really, really hope that we don't, part of our character is that we're such a diverse community. And then I'm going to run back to the hugging the trees. I just learned that certain insects have migration. And we just ruined the Lampa situation as far as a migrational location. And the animals don't know that they're not going to have next season there. It's just their home is going to be gone. So please keep that in mind when we start to just overall redo the plan of our master area growth and such. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any more? No? Okay, we'll bring it back up here. Supervisor Schutte, you're wanting to comment, not the motion. Okay.
Correct.
Go
I
ahead.
want to comment. First of all, I'm encouraged by this conversation. I think the whole idea of coming back to update, to make recommendations and to revisit Title 18, to talk about Title 16 with airport, to clarify specific plans and how each, a specific plan to mean, it makes sense to me that they're all different because they're specific to that area. And then to also speak to or about 1710, to kind of plant that seed to have us all really considering what direction do we want our community to go into. And as Leanne mentioned on there's different perspectives, different needs, and it's not one or the other, but perhaps it can be a collaboration. At the December Planning Commission, when I watched it several times and took notes, and those notes got added to all of this, but Hope was talking about during the Lampa conversation about water and drainage and concerns and memories of ducks or of inmates running away from the prison, whatever one's memory was. And Hope, thank you for this wonderful light bulb in that at the moment, the master plan is crafted for development, and that core development and infill within the core part of the community is important in that it really helps keep the costs of infrastructure down. It's a more useful and mindful approach to very limited resources and limited budgets. That said, we also, and this gives us that opportunity to consider it, we need to also craft for land preservation within the core so that not only do we are we able to perhaps allow the groundwater to absorb in these storm events like we're having? We're also able to allow for folks who have lived here their whole lives or moved here with something in mind, that it's all is not lost, and yet also allow for that more respectful development approach and infrastructure planning, so that we can really make this a community for everybody, to provide for workforce housing. I mean, after I retired from teaching and I was working for Humane Network as an outreach manager and being paid $60,000 a year, and a gal I was working with had her college degree, was being paid $60,000 a year, and she was just so bummed she can't afford to live on her own. $60,000 a year. I didn't make that as a teacher. And so when we talk about workforce housing and we talk about low income, I mean, low income can be $60,000 a year professional position, and yet in this current market, there's no place to live. And so to have these conversations, I think, gives us all an opportunity to really speak from all the different angles and approach it with that open, holistic, how do we work with everyone perspective. So thanks.
Okay, Supervisor White, do you want to make a motion?
I can make a motion.
Okay.
I move to accept the master plan report from the Planning Commission as presented.
And did you want to address allow staff to work on the airport overlay? Because that wasn't from the
Yeah.
planning. Okay,
Yes.
just to clarify on the
Thank
motion.
you.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no. Let the record reflect the motion was unanimous. Thank you. Okay, we're on to our Board of Supervisors non-action items. City Manager, is there anything to report?
Just a few things that will be coming up in the next couple months. You're going to be seeing a lot of public works. They're going to be bringing back the ordinance for the landfill rates, and also they'll be bringing forward the roadway funding initiatives. And then from finance, we'll be doing the budget assumptions in February and the cost allocation plan for the fiscal year 24 budget.
That sure came fast. Okay, does any member here have any updates or anything they want to share? Supervisor Giomi?
Yeah, we, Supervisor Cute and I were at the Carson Water Subconservancy District meeting last night, and I'm happy to report for the second year in a row, Carsonite won the Andy Aldex Award, and it was Rob Fellows this year. Last year it was Bruce Scott, and it was Rob Fellows for his work in the watershed. You know, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody over the last 20 years in Carson that has not done more for improving the safety of our citizens from stormwater runoff and flooding, and, you know, work to keep costs down for homeowners that have flood insurance or have to have flood insurance. A quick update on the water year. Just as a side note, the water year starts October 1st and runs through September 30th. So for the current water year, the 2023 water year, as of last December, the snow water equivalent was 193% of normal. That was on December 18th. On January 18th, it's now 291% of normal for the snow water equivalent in the Carson River watershed. So that's the drainage that makes up all the waters that drain into the Carson River. River flow at the Carson gauge this week was 10 times the average. So there's a lot of water in there. And Lahontan, which is the water storage facility for our watershed, holds about 300,000 acre feet of water. A month ago, it was at 25,000 acre feet. It's at 90,000 acre feet right now. And we got more snow. We got more snow. So it's good. It's good that we're getting this in the form of snow. That's what our water region is based off of, is getting our moisture in the form of snow. and then slow runoff. That's the ideal scenario that we want, and so far it's lining up that way.
Good that it's frozen, so it does have that
Yes.
slow runoff.
No, that is the point.
Avoids
That's
the flood
exactly the way
and-
we need it.
And
Yep.
allows saturation.
Exactly. And penetration and then
Right.
runoff. So it does everything we want. The last couple of years, we've been below normal. Even when we were near normal, we got the majority of that precipitation in the form of rain, which is not the way we want it.
And early.
And early, yeah. And we want it in the form of snow so that, as you said, it absorbs into the ground, recharges the aquifers, and then slowly runs off to the river and down to Lawn. So that's it for me.
Makes your high elevation backpacking rather tedious in April, however.
Yeah, probably impossible.
Is there- I don't see anyone else with a comment, so we will now move on. We will have a closed meeting to confer with council, just to let you know upon adjournment of our final action as a liquor and entertainment board. Final public comment for the Board of Supervisors. You could both come up and take a different chair. Ms. Bormaster.
This is the main reason why I am here.
State your name.
This is Dee Dee Formaster with the Rules Center for Independent Living. I came here because I am exceedingly upset about what happened at David Street Apartments. I don't think that this community would normally do what happened at the David Street Apartments, which is throwing 23 families on the streets in the middle of an atmospheric storm. There was not proper notification. There was not enough follow through. There was not enough resources. And I'm not blaming the city, but I'm not blaming Bill Krantz either. What I'm saying is we as a community need to handle this differently. So being the person that I am going to ask that we please bring aboard people who can create a board so that this never happens again. Because I have to tell you that I have a young lady who came home after her brother died. And I mean, they drove from Idaho because the weather was so bad that she could not get a plane home. So her sister drove her all the way from Idaho home. And all she wanted was to reach the safety of her home. As she collapsed on the bed, there was a knock at the door, and it was the neighbor saying, "You have to get out." Now, I know that all of us would not want that knock on our door and someone telling us to get out now because the building has been red tagged with no notice to anyone and a bunch of completely confused residents. It was an absolute and total mess. And I cannot tell you how disgusted and upset I am that this occurred. Where is our empathy as a community? Where is our ability to work out problems as a community? I'm ashamed of the way this was handled. So I'm asking, please, that a community board be appointed to handle things like this from now on, because this was a horrible, horrible disaster.
Thank you, Ms. Formaster. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your hard work.
Ms. Coe?
Heather Coe for the record, and I did miss the first part of this meeting because my car got stuck. I have a problem with what happened at first because I don't believe just because there's an opening on a committee that someone should just be appointed without being vetted. I don't think you just need to fill a position without vetting someone. And I watched that happen the last board meeting. Someone get put in a position who is a left-wing activist pushing critical race theory on our schools. He chose to have a meeting and bring people in, Michael Smith. And he was screaming at me, and I was very intimidated. So I don't understand how people aren't being vetted well. I realize Sisolak brought him in at first, but I do have a real problem when we have people that are literally left-wing activists on any kind of committee, whether it be left or right. But this is ridiculous, and the people that he brought into that meeting were also ridiculous. And they were all really rude. The only thing they cared about was pushing critical race theory on our children. And they didn't want to hear anything else. And I have a real problem with that. So if you guys would at least take the time before putting someone on a committee, I would appreciate that. Because he's not just angry, he is an activist. And we don't need people like that on committees. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public comment? Okay. With that, then, sorry, caught up in the cords. We are adjourned as the Board of Supervisors, and we will now call the Liquor and Entertainment Board to order. Do we have any public comment for the Liquor and Entertainment Board? Seeing none, we'll go on to agenda item 23. Oh, roll call, sorry. I was going to let the record reflect we're all still here, but go ahead. Sorry.
Chair Bagwell.
Plus Kenny has to come up. We'll give him 2 seconds. Kenny, you're going to join us on the, are you going to join us up here? Okay, give you just a moment to let the room clear and come on up. Did we save him a chair? No chair? That was an impossible answer, not to drink your coffee. You know that.
Sure, President Carter is mad at me. My thermostat is set on
Okay.
71.
Yep, Kenny. All right. Mr. Hohen, may I have a roll call, please?
Chair Bagwell.
Here.
Member Furlong. Here. Vice Chair Chiome.
Here.
Member Horton. Member Schutte.
Here.
Member White.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you so much. Again, any public comment for the Liquor and Entertainment Board? Seeing none, we'll go to action on the approval of our minutes of November 3, 2022. Does any member see any necessary changes? I will accept a motion for approval of the minutes of November 3.
Move to approve the Carson City Liquor and Entertainment Board for their meeting of November 3, 2022 as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for approval. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Kitty, you can hit the one that, hit the green button for yourself. There you go. Let the record reflect the, yeah, he was on, fat thumb. Yeah. Let the record reflect the motion was unanimous. Thank you. We're now on to agenda item 24A, which is discussion only. It's the presentation regarding the Liquor Hearings Officer 2022 Annual Report. Ms. Ferris.
Heather Ferris for the record. The municipal code requires the liquor hearings officer provide an annual report to the liquor board. We now have 2 liquor hearings officers, me and Hope Sullivan, the Community Development Director. We also work closely with the Sheriff's Office. A uniform officer attends most meetings to discuss the importance of server training and not serving to minors. In 2022, we held 8 meetings and approved 21 liquor licenses. The Sheriff's Office conducts periodic compliance checks, and this past year, a total of 36 businesses were subject to compliance checks. 8 businesses failed and were issued citations. And that concludes my report.
Does any member have a question? We're letting her off. Okay, thank you so very much. This was just a discussion only, so thank you. We're now on to final public comment for the Liquor and Entertainment Board. Do we have any? Okay, seeing none, then we are adjourned as the Liquor and Entertainment Board. We will take just 5 minutes, let the room clear, and we'll go to our closed session.